Welcome everyone to the Southern RAC meeting tonight. We'll go ahead and jump right in with RAC introductions and then the procedures. Let's start with introductions. Do we have any board members online? It's hard to see the screen.
I don't see anybody right now.
Okay.
Well, click on the list there.
I'm online. This is Chad.
Oh, we do have Chad.
Chad, we don't have any board members online, but let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself, Chad, and then we'll start down here with Gene and introduce the RAC members.
Chad Utley, St. George, Utah, public at large.
Gene Boardman, Hinckley, Utah, public at large.
Chuck Chamberlain, Cedar City, Forest Service.
Riley Roberts, Tropic, Utah, sportsman.
Fred Richmond, Beaver, Utah, sportsman.
Greg Lobb from Burl, Utah, agriculture.
Erlen King from Bicknell, Utah, agriculture.
Dan Fletcher, Cedar City, Utah, Bureau of Land Management. Austin Atkinson, Cedar City, Utah, public at large.
Thank you. Just a little bit different here tonight. You guys probably have already seen this, but we won't have speakers in front of us. We have these two speakers here, and the video will grab whoever's talking. We've got really high tech tonight. It also can be scary if you make bad comments. They'll zoom right in on you and capture it. So just a comment, when you talk, speak up and loud to it, but also we need to avoid side conversations. It'll pick those up. And audience members, if you have questions or comments, you can just stand up where you're at. It'll zoom in on you. So we'll just ask you to stand in place and state your name. So let's go over the RAC procedure real quick. What we'll do is we have a full agenda again tonight. So we have a lot to go over. With each item, we'll have questions from the RAC, then questions from the public, comments from the public, and then comments from the RAC, and then we'll entertain motions. So that'll be the process. We don't have a whole lot of public here, but for those that are here, please fill out comment cards and please participate. We love having your comments and feedback. It helps us a lot. We did get there's quite a few emails and online comments, so we do feel like we have some good feedback. Anything I missed? Good. So with that, we'll go ahead and accept a motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
I'll make that motion.
So,
Approve the agenda and minutes.
okay, do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Craig and a second by Vernon. Oh, sorry.
I'd like some discussion a little bit.
Okay.
Have they changed who records these minutes lately? I mean, it seems like, as I read through some of this minutes from last meeting, that they were pretty much incomplete compared to what we talked about. And seemed to me that there could be a problem there, skewing the minutes to one way or the other that maybe wasn't really there. And so it seemed like in the past, when we had the meetings, pretty much everything that was said was there, no matter how poorly it was said, which I noticed a lot of times when I'm talking, that's what it was. But it seemed to me like these minutes now are edited, maybe briefer than what they've been in the past, and left stuff out that I didn't.
So Vernon, I can explain that, and if there's feedback. So there was inconsistency between how the different RACs were summarizing their minutes. So we standardized that using a format that kind of the northern region and central region planned, and it is more of a summary than a complete record of the minutes. And we thought our thought process was the meetings are out on YouTube in the complete form, video and audio, and anybody can go, and if they want to hear exactly what was said, there's an opportunity for them to go do that, because those are all posted on YouTube. But if you feel strongly that we need to go back the other way, then I'm certainly willing to take that into consideration. So but that, it has changed and that's why. So I think if there's feedback from the RAC that let me know.
Yeah, and that was another question is if there is, you know, the video or whatever on YouTube, wherever. I just, curious to know what the other RAC members think. Does they have any knows that?
So what's the feelings of this? Are you okay with a shorter summary in writing with it being available on YouTube to go watch the whole RAC meeting? I mean, you can go on YouTube and search Southern Region, RAC, and it'll come up all of the meetings. For Utah Division of Wildlife Southern Region RAC, it'll all come up. So,
It comes up on your website too, doesn't it? Isn't it
it's
there?
available on the website as well, but you can just search it directly in YouTube also.
Vernon, I guess I have a question with that. You said that it felt like it was incomplete. Was there something that you felt like wasn't conveyed correctly? Because I do think that would be an issue. As far as making it more concise, I don't know that I'm worried about that, but if we're getting incomplete, I think that's a concern.
Or if it feels like it's biased one way or the other,
Yeah.
that would be.
Well, and that was why I bring it up. That's when I made the comment about their, you know, building that road and that parking lot on top of that hill at the Nickel Bottoms. It was a think of a battle during the Black Hawk Indian War, and that was all left out. I mean, it was like the parking lot flooded, or, you know, when I mentioned that too, it was a whole different parking lot, but, you know, your comment that it was culturally approved got there, but, you know, it left
So my staff's
everything
a little
else
biased
out.
towards me and against you, I can
Well,
see that.
you know, whether it, I mean, if your comment doesn't make sense, why would it be?
Without the context of.
Yeah,
what you're
without the
commenting.
context of the historical Black Hawk Indian War, the Battle of Red Lake, they call it, you know, and so that was something that this new form can leave out, and unless, and maybe as you read that, you wouldn't say, well, that's strange, maybe I better listen to the whole, you know, and I just don't want stuff, you know, pertinent stuff left out that might skew one way or the other. Was why I bring it up. So I wanted to make sure we know.
You know what I might suggest, Vernon? We do have a motion in a second, but what you may want to do is ask to amend the motion. To just clarify that conversation, go back and have that clarified conversation added to the minutes. I think that'd be appropriate.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Well, my main concern is that other things aren't left out, or it's skewed towards maybe one side or the other. I think that's a risk that we might have with this kind of format.
And you know, you brought that point up, so you paid attention to it. I read over the minutes, but I didn't catch that because you was, you know, you was involved with it, so I appreciate what you're saying.
So if you guys are comfortable with going this route, I will ask Denise and Alyssa to maybe find a happy medium between where we were and where we are now in terms of how much detail they put in the minutes, knowing that they can also go to the video, but let's watch it over the next little while and see if we find the spot that everybody's comfortable with. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fine. That's just why I bring it up. I would not like it skewed one way or the other. And pertinent stuff left out that maybe I feel pertinent, but maybe
I appreciate what you're saying, because anytime I speak there, I look at it and make sure they got what I said and what you said. So I think there needs to be
Okay, we'll go that way. Denise had her hand raised, but I don't know that she has a mic to say anything. Oh, we've got Wade online.
Okay.
Let me work on that.
Okay.
And let me say, early before you leave, make sure you talk to Gary. There's been a lot that's happened with that, with the cultural stuff that we talked about since our last meeting. And Gary's been right in the middle of all of it and can give you a good update on that.
I wonder if we could get an update right now. I think it'd be relevant to this meeting and to the conversation. Do we have comment on that?
We can go into more details, he said, and who seconded the motion to, on the minute?
Dan?
So Dan seconded, thanks Denise.
Yeah, right. Do you want to take this minute to give us a quick summary of?
Introduce yourself, Gary.
Yeah, so Gary
Sorry,
Besser,
Gary.
I'm the habitat manager for the Division of Wildlife in the Southern Region. We've definitely been working on that. I did not attend the RAC meeting. I've heard that there was a discussion, but I don't know the complete context and how much background was provided at that time. But prior to going in with the excavators, we did do the full SHPO consultations. SHPO is State Historic Preservation Office, and they returned a finding of no significance, to use a BLM type term, but saying that we were cleared to go ahead and do that. So we began that work. Specifically, as we did begin that work, they did find some things. It was more of, it wasn't related to the Black Hawk type stuff. It was more of a garbage dump type find. Archaeologists get excited about a lot of different things, and history sometimes is a garbage dump, but there's things to be learned there. And so we do have we're in the middle of a process of that. It's called a discovery related to a project. And so we have to record that and do all that. We're in the middle of doing that, but in the process of that, the State Historic Preservation Office has said there's still no concerns. It's still a project that can be approved and move forward. You want me to go as far as, okay, so subsequent to that, the next door neighbor has also complained and does not like the idea. We've held some internal discussions and actually decided that we're going to back off. We don't feel like at this time, we'd rather focus on the things that are happening in the marsh, and we're going to just back off and not complete that project. So we're going to put a fence there, not allow people to drive in anyway, and we've halted the project. So there's a full update for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, any additional discussion on that? We do have a motion in a second. All right, all in favor of the motion? And Chad?
Aye.
That was one painful eye.
You okay, Chad?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Motion passes.
That process there just reminded me, one thing that's been difficult for the minutes is knowing who seconds the motion. That's one thing that we miss quite often. So let's be very deliberate about that so that they can make sure that they can get that in the minutes correctly, because that's one of the places where we struggle. So.
Okay. And the wildlife board meetings update, do you have that pulled up? It was a long meeting, so bear with me. I'll read through the motions one by one. If you have any questions, either stop me or wait till the end, but I'll just start going through. So there was a motion to approve the, we don't need to vote on it. There was a motion to approve the permit numbers for general season buck deer permits on the following units: Chalk Creek 2000, East Canyon 1700, Morgan South Ridge 1400, Camas 1700, and Eaton 1900. And that motion passed.
And those were all reductions from our original recommendation because there was more mortality than we had originally estimated there would be.
Yeah. Then there was a motion to approve the permit numbers for central region units as presented, with the exception that Alberta Stansbury be cut to 2000. And that motion passed with a tiebreaker by the chairman. Next motion was to approve the 0 permit increases in the southern region, staying with the 2022 permit numbers, with the exception of Pine Valley going to 2300. And that motion passes 5-1. Next motion to approve the permit numbers for the southern southeast region as presented. And that motion was a tiebreaker, also passed with a tiebreaker by the chairman. The next motion was to approve the permit numbers for the southeast region as presented, with the exception that LaSalle was set at the South Mountains stay at 1200. And that motion passed as a tiebreaker again. next motion to approve the permit numbers for the Northeast region is presented with the exception of the Wasatch Mountain East being changed to 4,250. That passed unanimous. The next motion to increase the Fillmore Oak Creek limited entry permits by 5 and not the 11 as proposed, and that passed unanimous. Next motion to approve the remaining permit numbers as presented by the division, and that passed unanimous. The next agenda item is a motion to accept the once in a lifetime permit recommendations as presented by the division. That passed unanimous. Next agenda item, the bull elk permit recommendations. There was a motion to ask the division to look at the mandatory tooth reporting, and this is to be placed on the action log. That passed unanimous. Then a motion to approve the permit recommendations as presented by the division, including the additional 250 draw only youth bull elk permits, and that passed unanimous. Next agenda item was the buck pronghorn permit recommendations. And there was a motion to accept the buck pronghorn permit recommendations as presented. That passed unanimous. Next agenda item was the antlerless permit recommendations. There was a motion to approve as presented by the division with the exception of the 4 increases and that those stay at the 2022 levels. That motion was later withdrawn. Then there was a motion to approve the antlerless permit recommendations as presented. That passed 4-2. On the CWMU antlerless permit recommendation, there's a motion to reduce the number of antlerless permits by 50% across the board, and that motion was later withdrawn. Then there was the longest promotion, or longest motion I've seen. I have to take a breather in the middle. There was a motion to ask the division to form a CWMU advisory committee to review the rule and bring recommendations back to the board in June of 2024. The committee should consider if the rule is equitable for both public and private parties. It needs to be incentive-based program to encourage CWMUs to fulfill antlerless harvests. Tools need to be in place to encourage CWMU operators in the division to obtain necessary harvest for unit objectives. The rule needs to address non-contiguous lands and set requirements for trade lands. Land traded needs to be comparable to be fair to both public and operator. Trade lands need to be posted with a common sign such that the public can easily recognize it as such. And if public tag increase or decrease, then the CWMU tag should do the same. This is to be placed on the action log, and that passed unanimous. And let me pause on that one. That one's a good one to take note of. That'll be relevant in one of the action items later tonight. So some of the decisions in the action on the agenda later tonight are addressed in that motion, or some of the discussions we keep it into. So next was a motion to approve the Summit Point request for 6 cow permits, and that passed 5-1. Then there was a motion to approve the remainders presented by the division, and that passed unanimous. Next was a CWMU rule amendment, and there was a motion to approve the CWMU rule amendments as presented by the division. That passed unanimous. Next was a motion to approve the big game rule amendments as presented by the division. That passed unanimous. And then the big game rule amendments, there was a motion to approve peak-mounted single lens clarifiers and verifiers for archery. That passed unanimous. There was a motion to approve two-way radio band portion of the presentation. And then there was an amended motion to apply this, to have this apply to restricted weapons and ham stunts specifically. And that passed 4-2. Then there was a motion to allow matchlock ignition and friction lock to be included in the restricted muzzleloader definition. That passed unanimously. And finally, to accept the remainder as presented, and that passed unanimously. That's it. Any questions?
I've got one.
I hope not. Oh, great. Kevin has the answer because go ahead.
Okay, you know that, before the buck deer, motions were all made, that there was big discussion. And basically it went, we'll forget about the biology, we'll forget about the social, there's a political, element here. And, that was, what directed the whole, buck deer thing. You agree that that was the way it went?
Are you asked, oh, yeah, that is the way it went. Yeah, I think you summarized it.
Certainly those comments were made, and I think they had some influence. I don't know with who and by, and I don't know much more about it than that, Gene.
Yeah, I don't think I would necessarily have an opinion on how accurate those statements were, but those were the statements made and that was the discussion, yes.
Apparently there was something big going on somewhere.
Someone got excited about something, I think would be fair to say.
I'm afraid that we took a beating on that, the whole state.
We do have Kevin laid on.
Okay. Yeah, that's I don't know if this is a great time to recognize them. Gene, you want to ask them that question? Just kidding. We do want to recognize two wildlife board members, Kevin and Wade, have both joined us, so thank you for being here. Appreciate you being on.
Yeah, don't ask us that question.
Any other discussion on that item? Okay, let's go to the regional update, Kevin.
You could pull that presentation up, please, Phil. I've got it on my screen here, so hopefully I'll remember to ask you to advance the slides. Okay, go ahead and go to the second slide, please, and then into the third one. So we have had a beaver elk committee that's been meeting, and the Vermont elk committee's been formed and been meeting. We've had really good meetings on both of those units, and there will be unit plans presented on both of those units in the November RAC, and I think we're anticipating a couple of other elk unit committees, probably on the Southwest Desert and the Penguich Lake. And we only form elk committees if we are anticipating potential for a increase in population objective or a boundary change. And so we won't be having them on all of the units, but we've got two that are pretty much done, and then a couple of others that will be coming. So sage grouse let counts, really tough to get into, but we, on a positive note, we did find a new lek up on the Parker with 109 males, and that's significant. That means about 500 sage grouse when you put the statistics to it on males and everything. So pronghorn fawns and elk calves have started to hit the ground. We've started live trapping beavers from conflict areas and working with the Forest Service and the counties to move those to areas where they'll be usually high in drainages where they can not cause conflict and do some good. Next slide. Just a note of interest for people in Iron County, we've got a pair of bald eagles that are just kind of what's west of town that have successfully hatched chicks and are in the process of raising those. Hopefully they'll fledge here within I don't know, when will they fledge, Teresa?
They're trying to teach them to fly right now.
Okay,
So
so
fly
they're-
to a nearby tree and try to
Okay.
call to each other and do some blabbing.
Next slide, please. I mentioned last time that we had the avian influenza going through the California condor population. It was 18 at that time. It's 21 now that have died from that. That's like 20% of the population, in this part of their range. So it's significant. We think that's over now. Typically, as the weather starts to warm up, we don't have issues with avian influenza, but still a significant hit to the condor population. On a positive note, there has been a pair that hatched a chick near Zion, which is really cool. Hopefully that will get to fledging. Utah prairie dog counts are a lot higher than they have been, which we anticipated with the late summer moisture and everything. So we'll be working with everybody to make sure we're resolving conflicts. that's a really good thing is when we're about to present our conservation strategy that came through this process a few months ago to the Fish and Wildlife Service and begin the process that we hope will end in delisting. So that's a real positive. And we're continuing habitat work up the game in our waterfowl areas and developing food plots. Next slide, please. Our aquatic section, this is a really busy time for them. They've been delayed with a lot of their gill netting, but so far things look pretty good. We're anticipating that all the reservoirs are going to be full or close to it. And I kind of made this comment last time, but it's worth saying again, fishing is probably going to be tough this summer. Partially because the fish numbers are down a little bit because we've had low water for several years, but probably more so because there's a lot of habitat and a lot of food that they haven't had access to that they do now. And so you're going to have fish that are with full bellies and harder to catch. Next slide. Just some information there on the reservoirs that they've gill netted. I'll let you just kind of look through that. Numbers are down, but we still have some large fish and wiper numbers look really good in Minersville. Well, we have in Minersville and several others, but particularly in Minersville is what that graph is showing. Next slide, please. Otter Creek looked better than they anticipated. Trout numbers are good, rainbow trout numbers are good, and Utah chub numbers remain low there. It's really good for Otter Creek. Panguitch Lake's a little bit different story. Trout numbers are above average, but if those of you that have been around for a while, back in 2004, a huge effort. We treated Panguitch Lake to remove Utah chubs. Other than Strawberry Reservoir, the largest road known project we've ever done. That has held Utah chub numbers down to single digits in our nets until this year. For whatever, and not sure why, but the chub numbers are up significantly in Panguitch Lake. And so we will be introducing wipers into Panguitch Lake as another predator to help control the Utah chub numbers. They've been very successful in Minersville and Newcastle and several other lakes in helping us control Utah chubs and allowing the trout and other species to thrive. Wipers are a sterile hybrid, and so we can control population numbers and use them as a tool. They also become a really popular sport fish. Newcastle Reservoir's produced, I think, a couple of state record wipers over the last few years, and I would guess with the productivity of Panguitch Lake, it won't be long before there's state record wipers coming out of Panguitch Lake. So we hope that does two things. It becomes a new opportunity for sportsmen, but then also helps us control chubs at Panguitch Lake. Our Washington County field office is always busy and getting a lot done. They're in the middle of flycatcher monitoring and trapping cowbirds, Gandy Spring restoration out in the West Desert, Escalante River non-native removals. We've got internships with the Color Country Natural Resource Camp, the Desert Tortoise population monitoring, and the Red Cliffs Reserve and the National Conservation Area. We've got Ann here tonight that you'll hear from on tortoises later. Summer flow plans and pump back with Washington County Water Conservancy District. You guys would be amazed at how complicated the system is in Washington County. They can move water uphill and downhill and across everywhere with the pumps they have, which is needed with the growth that's going on in Washington County. And then the urban wildlife program is always busy in Washington County with rattlesnakes and other things showing up in people's yards this time of year. So, next slide, please. Our habitat section, let's hold right there. That bridge on the right-hand side there is the bridge that will be going in at Bicknell Bottoms to allow access to the upland game habitat that's on the other side of the river. We have a small area on where the parking lot is, and when we release pheasants in the fall, a lot of them fly across the river and nobody has access to them. That bridge will allow access over the river and open up a lot of habitat and hunting opportunities for people on Bicknell Bottoms, both for upland game and for waterfowl. We've had some damage on some of our WMAs on the infrastructure, like everybody's dealing with the runoff that's coming down. Our livestock grazing season has started or will be starting shortly. Something that we're excited about, where we've got a fencing contract in place to do 4 miles of fence around the Indian Peaks. So Indian Peaks is 4 miles on a side. We hope over the next 4 years we can completely refence our wildlife management area out at Indian Peaks. It's between elk and horses. It's a tough fence to maintain, and it's old as it is, and so a new fence out there will make a huge difference. And then cheatgrass control projects in Beaver and Washington counties, a new herbicide called Rejuvra is showing a lot of promise, that we may actually have a tool that we can not just suppress, but control cheatgrass with in the future. It's early in the game, but results are really promising right now. Next slide, please. Our outreach section, this is the time of year where they're really busy. Next slide. So they had a Utah Prairie Dog Day with Bryce Canyon on May 11th. We'll have a women's introductory archery clinic in June. Free Fishing Day is coming up on June 10th. A 22 caliber shoot on July 11th in Cedar City. We have a SUU intern that's starting. Dedicated hunter program is gearing up. We're anticipating an increase in need for people wanting dedicated hunter hours for 2 reasons. First, we had a lot of people graduate out of the program last year, and with the new license fee increase and the increased cost to buy hours, we're anticipating that's going to motivate more people to go out and do projects rather than purchase their hours. And then we'll have the Color Country Natural Resource Camp at the end of May and 1st of June up on the Pine Valley Mountains that we partner with the Utah State Extension on. That's all I have for today. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
I just asked you about the fence around out the Indian Peaks around there. Is it gonna be, keep the horses out? Is that the plan?
Hopefully it'll keep the horses out and the cows out and allow the elk in. That's the goal. So, yeah.
I had a question about the elk management plans. You said 2 of them have been underway. Can you give us kind of what's the flavor of those meetings?
They've gone really good. They've been really positive. We've had sportsmen and Farm Bureau and local grazers represented on each of them. They've been very cool and productive. So we've started on a really, I know Mike's done both of them on the Pavant and the Beaver, and I don't know if it's just Mike's magic touch, but so far so good. So.
Introduce Sean.
Oh, yes, we have a new conservation officer, Sean Stuckey. So Sean will be going to Wayne County, so you should introduce yourself to Berlin before he leaves today. He'll be your neighbor. And we're happy to have him. We haven't had an officer in Wayne County since Julie moved over to Sevier County, and we're excited. We've got a brand new crew between Morgan and Sean in Wayne County, and I think they're going to hit it like a whirlwind in a good way. So, thank you, Sean.
All right. Let's get to the next, the first action item on the agenda. So the wild turkey plan, revision and recommendations. And Heather, can you give us any updates, clarification of the other RACs?
Thanks so much. So I did want to start off with just, as I've done with the other RACs, just kind of stating what passed in legislation regarding air guns this year, just because not everyone's had the time to go over the resolution. So there was a House bill passed this year to legalize air guns for the take of wild turkey in the fall season only, as well as for rabbit and hare. And this bill states that the pre-charged pneumatic air rifle means a rifle that fires a single projectile with compressed air released from a chamber built into the rifle and pressurized at a minimum of 2,000 pounds per square inch from an external high compression device or source, such as a hand pump, compressor, or scoop tank. So that portion is just an informational item, since that was already passed by legislation. And then my mouse did something and I lost my spot. I'm so sorry. 1 second. So then in addition to that, we did want to add some other minimum requirements just to ensure legality. So we're recommending that the taking turkey rule will state that air rifle will fire a single broadhead tipped bolt or arrow or pellet or slug during the fall season that is 25 caliber or larger, weighs 18 grains or more, and is fired at a velocity to produce at least 30 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. So those are the minimum requirements that we can discuss as far as what we can vote on tonight. That was just for the air guns. Do you want me to also add one more point of clarification regarding the letter that was sent?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great. So we've talked a lot with this youth group, the Youth Hunter Voice. They've been absolutely incredible to work with, great partners, and we're hoping to work with them in the future on more mentoring programs that would encompass mentoring, targeting those other species that don't require permits. So just, pheasant, quail, rabbit, hare, chukar, there's tons of different upland game opportunities and waterfowl opportunities for the youth that we could work with them on mentoring. But with the turkeys, we did have the concern of year-round either sex permits, of course, because of brood rearing and summer season while there's that happening, as well as like the early breeding season that we intentionally already have. The mid-April season date is set so that we can allow for most of the breeding to occur before that limited entry season starts. And the issue that we would see with limited entry becoming available to all youth could be that, that would no longer be a controlled hunt while there still is a lot of breeding occurring. And we do want to preserve that high quality hunt with higher success, but also allow for fewer people on the landscape so that there's, so that they're not interrupting that breeding as much in the earlier season. And then of course, just to address the opportunity aspect of this, there is 15% of turkey per limited entry permits are allocated to youth as a minimum, but statewide last year we had 20% that were allocated to youth. And those youth, if they don't hunt the limited entry, they can go on to hunt during the 3-day youth season, which is statewide, and then also through the month of May, which is also statewide. And so we had kind of similar issues with the sharp-tailed grouse proposal as well, just concerned because that is kind of a limited population, and we are aware of their population declines due to habitat fragmentation and other issues, and just want to make sure that we're very controlled in our permits that we're offering for that species, especially where they were petitioned to be listed in the past. Granted, they were not found warranted to be listed, but just something that we're cognizant of.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks for both clarifications. Any questions from the RAC? Okay, seeing none. Questions from the public?
I think we have two public here, so you can both comment as much as you'd like. Good on that one.
We're still going to limit you to 3 minutes, though. We don't have any comment cards. Either of you want to comment on this one? Okay. Go ahead and open up for discussion from the RAC. Boy, it's going to be an easy night. Nothing, Austin? Saving it. I do think it's good just to point out, we do appreciate the clarification from Heather that the air guns, that's a legislative action. So we are going to have air guns. So that's not really something that we can beat up too much. So the other portions of it we can discuss.
I'll ask a question. How are the turkey numbers just in the southern region now that the hunt's almost over? What feedback have we got as RAC members?
That's a good question. I can defer to the southern region biologists as far as what they're seeing in their specific units. But generally what we would see is after the hunt closes, then we can compile all that harvest data, and based on some studies that were done, we assume that the amount of toms taken in the spring accounts for 10% of the overall population. So doing a population estimate with turkeys is a little bit retroactive, but we will be able to see those numbers coming out, in June, July sometime once we get those harvest results. And then those numbers feed into all of our permit calculators for fall and spring so that we're able to make sure that we're biologically sound in our permit recommendations. But I don't know if anybody has anything specific. I don't think there was a ton of winter loss down here. It sounds like we did a lot of great that way. And you guys won the award for translocation, so good job.
Do we have many fall, turkey hunts in the southern regions?
It depends on the year. And so for instance, last year, I think there were only 2. Is that correct? And so it just, they were very small targeted areas. I think one by near Fillmore and one by Escalante area. So, you know, it all depends on the amount of damage that we're incurring in the populations. We're having reductions like we've seen due to the drought in recent years. We can really usually be more effective in these deep snow depths. We can be really effective with trapping, but in drier years, it's really hard to get them to go into a trap. So sometimes hunting is the better option, just depending on the circumstance.
Go ahead, Gene.
I have a little bit of a problem with the fall hunts. More public land could be available in those hunts, and the public could enjoy them. Whereas if it's all on private land, the public at large is pretty well cut out, and only those that are in the good graces of the landowner is able to hunt that. That's just my comment. It'd be better for the public if more public land was available on the fall hunt.
Thanks, Gene.
May I comment? So we did actually incorporate that into the new turkey plan because we recognize that there are those areas where turkeys are going to come into private property, do damage and roost at nighttime. And then during shooting hours, they're going to, you know, make a circle. And sometimes their patterns are actually really close to where public land and private land intersect. So we realized the need for that. We did speak to that in the turkey plan, definitely. And we had mentioned that we wanted to keep those public pieces small and restricted as possible to make sure we're targeting the correct turkeys, because we don't want, as we've talked about before, we've renamed this as a fall management harvest because we want to make sure that this is just a management tool. And the primary objective to that is to alleviate those nuisance and depredation issues and not to provide opportunity necessarily. But we do recognize that there are a lot of situations where there's public and private patchwork, and we would need to account for that somehow. So by making it really easily to distinguish boundaries that hunters can identify easily in the field is how we're planning on moving forward with incorporating some private or public land.
Thanks, Evan. I did skip a step. We need to go back and get the public online.
I don't know if we've ever been consistent on when we do this, as long as we get it.
Usually when one of us remembers.
Exactly. There's only 4 comments on or people that commented on this. 75%, so 3 of them strongly agreed, and the one other was somewhat disagree. And the comment that was entered was in relation to the fall hunts, keeping them limited, and just making sure that they're targeted was the nature of the comment.
Any additional discussion? No. Please go ahead and entertain a motion. Go ahead, Chad.
I motion that we accept let me how this goes, the wild turkey plan revision recommendations as presented by the PW.
Yes, we have a motion to accept as presented by Chuck. And Riley seconded the motion. So a second by Riley. Got that?
Got it.
All right. Okay, any discussion? Is there a hand raised on?
Denise just said she got it.
She was making sure she got it. I asked them to let us know that they got it.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote, and we'll just do just a raise of hands instead of going down the line. I think these issues be easy enough tonight. So all in favor of add?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimous. Next one is the upland game recommendations. So Heather, if you want to just give us any updates or clarification on that one?
I think I summed that up accidentally in the first part, but yeah, just the air rifle, and again, with the unlimited youth permits for sharp-tailed grouse, that we have concerns about that, but.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC?
Just a question on, live decoys and electronic calls.
Yeah.
Currently, those are legal? Is that how I understand that?
I don't know that there necessarily have been legal, but there's not somewhere that it's stated explicitly that they're illegal. So I'm not sure where we have that in some of our rule and code where it could be interpreted either way. I don't know if the law enforcement wants to speak to that, but it wasn't explicit in our rules, so we wanted to make sure that it wasn't there.
To clarify, robotic decoy would be any turkey that moves of any sort of.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah, any kind of machine-looking turkey is what I interpret that to be.
Paul, anything you'd like to add to that? Oh, okay, thank you.
Great.
I'm not a waterfowl or upland hunter much, but, for duck hunting, you can still use a decoy that has flapping wings. Is that fair? And that would be considered robotic, right? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And just to speak one clarifying point, sorry, I just wanted to let the RAC know that this was something that came up in our technologies portion of our committee. And it was at the tail end of our committee meetings, we kind of said, okay, what does everybody feel that we should incorporate into this upcoming technologies discussion? And those were the things that they had noted that they wanted to see. So, so yeah, we do feel that these are our recommendations, and we do adopt it fully, but that was part of that discussion.
Any other questions? All right, questions from the public?
Yeah, actually, I have a hard time talking, so, anyway, what I wanted to ask was, I didn't hear anything where you're working with the landowners to maybe, have trespass fees, maybe have special tags for those areas or what have you. Have you thought of any of those things?
Yeah, regarding turkeys, is that what you're thinking, or
Turkeys, yeah.
for depredation issues, or
No, not depredation, but I mean,
just for
just
opportunity?
work with the landowners to get permission for a certain amount of this. Come on, you can sell tags if you need the revenue, or maybe do something with the landowners.
Sure. So we do have some programs such as walk-in access. We've got some CWNU LOAs. Those are different programs that we offer to landowners. We haven't reached out to landowners individually and asked them, would you like to sponsor a quail hunt or something to that effect? So we haven't, looked to secure that, but we do always try to work with landowners through those other public lands, private lands, public wildlife, programs.
Okay, I just didn't hear anything about the turkey, so I was curious. I have a bit of a wildlife background, and so we did a lot of things like that.
Excellent.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
We don't have any comment cards, so we'll go ahead and, oh, did you want to comment on this one?
Oh, no, go ahead, I'm sorry. I don't know the protocols, so forgive me.
So what we'll do each time on the public is we'll have questions from the public and comments from the public. If you want to make a comment, we do need to fill out a card. So you can look on the agenda items and fill out a comment card if you want, but the questions are open. So you're fine. You're right on track right now. And we'll take it easy on you tonight. This will be.
Well, I hope so. I'm trying to learn, actually.
Good.
I've only been here for about 5 years, and I'm slowly but surely trying to learn and keep my mouth shut. Like I'm on a water board, and I just, I kept my mouth shut for quite a while until I started learning things in that. But I mean, just as a general comment, I appreciate what you guys do with Habitat.
Thank you.
I mean, when I go out there and I see these cleared areas and stuff like that, and how many elk I see at times, I mean, I love it. I'm retired, obviously. I'm a disabled veteran, and I'm in the mountains all the time. I mean, I'll go 70 to 100 miles a day up there looking for animals. So, but I appreciate the work that you guys have done there. I do have one thing I don't like though. Why do you have the Jeep Jamboree during hunting season? Is that a sort of?
So that's not a decision of the Division of Wildlife makes. That's I think sponsored by the county. So I would direct you to there for that comment.
Yeah, it's actually Sevier County. Yeah, I was just curious. I saw that and I'm going, my God. These animals are already stressed out with this long as the hunting seasons are, and then you got this jamboree right in the middle of it. Go out and try to find an elk, you know.
Yeah, and that's something we have authority over.
Right.
Okay, but they.
Yep. You're all right. Want to go ahead and summarize the online comments?
Yeah, so comments on upland game.
It's actually.
We only had 3 comments, 2 strongly agreed, and 1 that was neutral, and I don't remember any written comments.
All right, discussion from the RAC. If there isn't any, we can entertain a motion.
I would make that motion. Pass as recommended by.
Okay, so we have a motion to pass as recommended. Do we have a second? Craig second. Craig seconded the motion.
And Riley made the motion.
Already said that twice.
No,
All right, any additional discussion? There wasn't any initial discussion, so I assume there's no additional. All in favor? And Chad? Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimous. Heather, we'll just keep on going, the waterfowl. Oh,
actually, Jason Jones is our new waterfowl coordinator.
all right, it has Heather on the agenda, but we'll give it to Jason.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I am the new waterfowl coordinator. They plucked me out of the marshes of the Great Salt Lake where I've been for 18 years, so I'm not totally new. So hopefully everybody had a chance to look at the presentation, but Phil is going to get a couple slides up there. I just want to provide some more context, especially down here in an area where folks maybe aren't hunting swans as much. So basically in 2019, you guys probably saw the swan regulations change. We opened up more property. We opened up public shooting grounds. We had 750 more tags, and we also had a lot more trumpeter swans coming in the state that winter. Probably weather, food dependent situation, and those trumpeter swans have been coming in every year since. Unfortunately, the season has shut down every year since coming in town because we put that quota. So the current recommendation that everybody read is to make harvesting and trumpeter swan illegal. And the division landed on that because we're trying to maximize opportunity to keep public shooting grounds open and keep the season from shutting down. And I think the Southeastern region called Heather today and said it would be beneficial for them tomorrow to hear a little bit about why we have these quotas and some of that information. So I just wanted to provide that for everybody. 20 years ago or so, there was a lawsuit from some environmental groups over trumpeter swans. There's 2 populations of trumpeter swans. One is the Yellowstone population of trumpeter swans, and one is the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans. The Yellowstone population is a sensitive population. So after this lawsuit, this lawsuit attested that those swans, those trumpeter swans, were from the Yellowstone population. So out of the lawsuit, there was environmental assessment, and that's where we got the quota. We got the 72-hour reporting, the swan orientation course. We agreed to go out and survey swans from a plane once a week, and that's where all that came from. Blair, when he was the waterfowl coordinator, he was able to bring Utah's quota from 10 to 20. And interestingly, Nevada has a quota of 10, and Montana doesn't have a quota. They have a self-reporting card. And it's just kind of interesting because Yellowstone is in Montana, but they're convinced that the Rocky Mountain population is the one they're harvesting, so they don't actually have a quota. So that's a little background on that. I have to make a correction that was in that presentation. There was a number stated of 100,000 trumpeter swans. So really we see about 50,000 tundra swans, and biologists are seeing about 3,000 trumpeter swans. And that was just an honest mistake. So let me go over what happened at the central region and the northern region RACs last week. They want us to be able to take the bird and make the take not illegal. And both of them came up with that recommendation. The division reviewed our codes and rules last week, and that is something we feel could be a possibility. However, I want to stress our current recommendation is to make the harvesting of the trumpeter swan illegal.
Okay, so you've not changed your recommendation.
We haven't changed our recommendation, but we had a meeting and we've been reviewing codes and rules, and we do believe it's possible, and it's something the division can live with, but the current recommendation stands.
Sounds good. I have a question before we open it up to everybody. When we say illegal, I think that's really where the concern comes from and came from in the northern and central. What are the parameters around illegal? Again, I get real nervous about just a lot of arbitrary illegal in there and what can I be charged with and what impact will it have. So what are we looking, do we have that spelled out?
Well, so if we have talked about that, I'm not gonna get one law enforcement folks up here, but when Wyatt was talking about, I mean, basically we're talking about, I mean, we've got one law enforcement individual here, but I take it like the same as if maybe you harvested 2 pintails and they want to rent you ticket. I can't speak for law enforcement, but something that would be, you know, an offense on your record, so. But the other part of that is harvesting the bird, because I know folks aren't you know, swan hunting down here, but the trumpeter is being harvested as a trophy. Some of them are. Other is an honest mistake. And so really the crux of the biscuit here is to seize the bird.
Yeah.
In my opinion, so.
Can you seize the picture? I'm just facetious, but I think that's part of the problem. They already have the picture by the time you seize the. Okay, questions from the RAC?
Let me just ask Paul, just clarify, difference between an infraction and a misdemeanor?
Generally, the infraction will have a lot lower fines and often is not on someone's actual criminal record, unless they're fingerprinted or other things. It usually doesn't go onto their official criminal record. And infractions are usually that way. I would guess that officers that would encounter a situation like this, it would be, you know, heavily use their discretion about how they would handle that, be it a warning, be it an infraction, and try to make good decisions based on the circumstances of the challenges of identifying that bird.
So give us a sense of things that people would be familiar with. When do we issue infractions in kind of a jump versus a misdemeanor offense or even a felony?
For a lot of the code, a lot of the violations, it's established there's only one option, but a situation like this, there would be 2 levels. There would be an infraction for basically a rule violation, a waterfowl rule violation that you could write, and that would be a not intentional taking of that bird, or a misdemeanor if somebody was clearly intentionally trying to take that. In this case, it might be difficult to differentiate what someone's intent is, but that's often what our officers will use in making a decision on whether to write a more significant violation or a more mild one, or even going over the line.
Thank you.
That's great clarification. That's going to really help me on my discussion when we get there. It's a good clarification. Thanks. Go ahead.
Did you have other slides?
Yeah, I've got a couple more slides I'd like to show. Phil, can you go to that next slide? So we just got a couple slides in here. For folks that aren't familiar with the area, the Bear River Bird Refuge and public shooting grounds are contiguous pieces of property. And there's a lot of sentiment around why the division just didn't go back to the original boundary. And we really feel like we're just going to push this problem around. We've got more trumpers in the state. Prior to 2019, 34% of swans were taken at the refuge. And as soon as we opened up public, which is 4 miles away, the pressure in the birds just moved up to public. Can you hit the next slide, Phil? So this is just playing around with the numbers a little bit. And it just kind of shows that the percentages of trumpeter swans taken at the Bear River Refuge and public shooting grounds are really not that much different. I mean, in 2020, 2.2% of the birds taken were trumpeters from public, and 3.2% taken were trumpeters from the refuge in 2020. In 2022, 2.8% of the birds taken at the refuge were trumpeters, and 2.6% taken at public were tundras. I mean, the birds are just mixing back and forth. If you can hit the next slide.
Let me just clarify. I'm not sure how familiar people are with the geography. These are all of the names that Jason's referencing up there. These are marshes on the northeast side of the Great Salt.
Yeah, these properties are all contiguous with each other, and that's why I just picked picked these little spots out, just to kind of show the birds are moving back and forth on these properties. The percentages getting harvested are relatively similar, even though there's more being taken there's more birds in total being taken in public. The percentage of trumpeters is pretty much the same. If you can hit that next slide, Bill. This is where the blue circle is. That's a unit 1A of the Bear River Bird Refuge. That's where like 20,000 swans like to sit sometimes. And then up on the top side there, 4 miles away, is public shooting grounds. And then up on the right side of the map is like Corinne area. And there's some private property in there, but I just wanted to put that up there just so everybody could see that as the crow flies, I mean, these properties are pretty close together here. And the birds are just mixing back and forth, so. Hit that last slide, Phil. So the goal was to prevent the swan season from closing because of trumpeter swan harvest. Trumpeters are being harvested across the entire hunt area. And we think closing the new hunt area will only increase trumpeter swan harvest back over at the Bear River Bird Refuge. And we won't really solve their problem. So we're hoping to maintain swan hunting opportunity at public shooting grounds. The area is managed for waterfowl hunting. And over 40% of total swan harvest occurred there in 2022 and 23. It's really a good place for waterfowl hunters to go. So.
All right, we're going to cut you off now, or are we done? I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead and cut me off.
All right. Questions from the RAC? Go ahead.
I'm not familiar with much of swans. Are they hard to tell apart, trumpeter versus?
So I hunt waterfowl, and I think that comes down to like if you're going to be patient and if you're going to learn how to identify species. With these swans, one is much bigger than the other, and they have different vocalizations. So you're not going to want to take a shot in bad light. There's a lot of shots you might not want to take, and if you do hunt waterfowl, I mean, a lot of us know that we probably are passing up on a lot of shots. But if you don't pass up on a lot of shots, you might end up, taking the wrong species for sure. But I think you can tell apart. I mean, I was hunting at Salt Creek last year when you can't hunt them, and we were hunting ducks, and they were just noisy and easy to tell apart. But the sun was out, it was a nice day, and I think we asked people to do this with, other waterfowl species, redheads, canvasbacks. I mean, the stop season shuts early, but you can still shoot a ringneck duck, and they look really similar. So, I mean, we'd be asking people to, be more choosy, and but I think it's totally doable.
What else?
Is it true when I've never checked in a swan, but when you check one in, if it measures over a certain length, that it is marked as a trumpeter regardless of if it's a duck?
So, no, that's not how we're going to do it. So what we're saying is 99% of birds that measure over 62 millimeters are trumpeters, and 99% of birds that measure below 60 are tundras. But we're going to use characteristics like the yellow eyeball to make those kind of decisions. If there's any question, people will text me to get the right answer. So, but that is something that had gone around in the past, and we're kind of looking at doing a video where we show our staff how we're going to measure, and we are kind of looking at redoing our swan orientation course too. So, but if it's a trumpeter, it's going to be called a trumpeter. If it's a tundra, it's going to be a tundra, and we can tell that by looking at the bill and the other characteristics. So.
Is it true that you use the word in the presentation poached? This would be considered poaching a swan if you shoot a trumpeter.
It will be considered illegal if this recommendation is passed. So.
And that's a question of law enforcement. Does that change your answer?
Yeah.
Poaching doesn't sound like an infraction.
So we don't really have a definition of poaching. That's more of just kind of the
Colloquial
social term that's used. So it would be an illegally taken animal, just like an elk or a deer or anything else that you don't have the proper tag for that species. So I guess under a technical definition, if you wanted to consider that poaching, that would be, but an illegal animal.
Is an illegal take of an animal without a valid permit an infraction?
So that could be written as an infraction, as a like a big game rule violation. Sometimes that's an infraction if somebody shoots the branch antlered bull on a spike tag, sometimes they will write an infraction for that instead of an unlawful take, depending on the circumstances that the officer finds on the ground there. So that's kind of a similar circumstance, and could be an unlawful take misdemeanor, could be an infraction based on officer discretion.
Another question, if 20 swans or trumpeters are illegally taken, the season's still shut down.
The season will shut down if we get the quota.
Do we have any data out of the, I assume 20 or a little more than 20 were taken last year? Do we have any data from those check-ins of how many were accidental versus?
No, we don't have that kind of data. I mean, I'm not sure people would be willing to give us that kind of data, but we know from looking at social media, the folks that are targeting. So I'm not sure who targeted those birds and who did it accidentally. So we don't have that kind of data.
We have, Austin, and Jason, correct me, we have anecdotal evidence that some people are targeting trumpeters.
Sure.
We don't know how prevalent it is in terms of the overall of the 20 that we're taking to shut down the quota. To say, 10 were taken purposely, 10 were accidental. We just don't have it.
I watched the other night in the Northern RAC, that those people, that it's a big thing to them, so it's a common discussion. And I had people say, you said you can tell them apart. I had people there, said they couldn't tell them apart. And I just had the thought as we was going through that, with an orientation like we have for bears and other things, help.
So we have an orientation course.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm new to the position and I haven't been in for swan tag. I like hunting ducks and geese, And so we need to look at the orientation course and see how good it is. I do. But that's part of getting your tag is going through the orientation course.
I mean, that would be maybe help.
Yeah, and it's mostly vocalizations and size that you're looking for in the birds.
You're supposed to, if you get a bear tag, you have to watch the orientation so you don't, so you know the difference between a female and male and cat and all that stuff. So.
My question, would there be any means in our rule where we could institute, I don't want to call it a fine, but a reporting, use an example, when you fail to report on your mandatory harvest, you got a $50 fee you have to pay before you're eligible in the draw. Is there anything we could use in rule that would be similar to that? Or it's not necessarily a criminal fine, but it's a reinstatement of some sort? Where I'm going with this is, say we confiscate the trumpeter and we put a hold on your customer ID where you can't participate in the draw.
Well, we already have the wildlife board put that 5-year waiting period on the books last year, and that's still on the books. If I don't understand your question. So if right now, if you harvest a trumpeter swan, you can't dry out for 5 years. That's still on the books.
Okay. Any other ideas? That's the way I'm thinking.
Is there, by the time this hunt rolls around, these trumpeters are all big, they're not juvenile or younger ones that will be the size of the other swan?
So the interesting thing is that juveniles are the same size as the adult, but they're not pure white, which is that can be hard to tell when you're hunting and you have like an overcast sky. I mean, really, with any waterfowl hunting, it helps if the sun's out, right? So for sure.
Who do we have to sell this 20 limit to? How do we get it from 10 to 20, and why can't it be 100? Who's going to yell at us?
Okay, so with all migratory birds, we work under the Fish and Wildlife Framework, and I'll be the representative that goes and works with the flyway. And we can work on these kind of issues, but we work within their framework, and what we have to have to take to them is data. And right now, we're taking feathers from these trumpeter swans, and we're sending them off to a lab, and the lab is slow, but you can see through isotope analysis where they're actually coming from. We're hoping that they're the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans. And they'll require several years of data before they'll make any kind of movement, but that's what we need to keep working towards. I'm hoping like we can also capture some trumpeter swans, which will be harder than buckets than cannons and maybe put some GPS collars on them. Now that I'm in the position, but this is all stuff that's going to take time. And we would hope that if we had enough data, that we could get rid of this quota, like Montana, who doesn't have a quota. So that would be the hope, but we have to keep working towards it.
Can I ask on Montana, did they just say, forget you and we're gonna do it? Or did they have the data in your opinion?
Well, I mean, it was all before my time, but the idea is that they apparently, I don't know who decided that they're only harvesting the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans. I haven't seen all the data, but that's just how it is. They don't have a quota, and they are known to be harvesting the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans and not the Yellowstone population of trumpeter swans. At least that's the logic.
So they must have had some data to make that case. We don't know what it is exactly.
I'm just trying to understand, did Fish and Wildlife actually stamp your quota and say 20 is good, or is it kind of a?
So the quota used to be 10, and where was able to get it moved to 20, working with the flyway over several years. But we'll have to have data to take it in before there's any kind of movement. The data will be like the better analysis and any other data we can bring to you. But right now, we have to work within those regulations. So.
And just to confirm, the Fish and Wildlife is not sponsoring any of this data or research. That is DWR sponsoring the isotope research or tenders.
I believe it's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is what I understand, but you know, I say a lot of wrong things, so I'll let you know.
I just had another question. The total number of swans harvested, how much, you know, what's that 20? What percent of that the total harvest is that 20?
I don't have that right in front of me right now. I can get it to you soon.
I can do a little, you know, how many swans were able to take?
I think we took like 800 and some swans last year. I'd have to look into it. If you want
That's close enough for me. I just want to know if it was, you know, 1,000 or if it was 500 or if it was.
We could have taken a lot more.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it got closed, how many people went home without a swab because it was closed?
That's why it's such a big issue up in our area, because people have traditions and they want to go after Thanksgiving. The swans move from north to south, and have the Port Market Bay and the marshes, and when the hunt closes so early, I mean, people are very unhappy.
Jason, to put it in context, how many tundra swan permits did we issue last year?
We issued 2,700 tundra swan permits. 2,750, thanks.
That's a pretty low percentage to shut it down on, in my opinion.
So that's why we wanted to make a movement to, if people stop targeting trumpeter swans. That's kind of where this recommendation came from. So.
You guys have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered what your fear is that, I mean, your feeling for illegal harvest. If we make this illegal to harvest them, will we still be losing the same number of trumpeter swans and they're just ditched in the bayou somewhere?
I don't know. I mean, some of that's going to happen for sure.
And I mean, that was the concern that I saw on several times. You know, they're just going to.
Yeah, I mean,
hide them because it's illegal and you still lose the same number, but the hunt will still be going. Maybe you'll lose more because.
All I know is it's harder to hide a trumpeter swan, and there's lots of eyes out in the
Not a
field.
tail, huh?
Yeah, it's not a green-winged tail. So.
Go ahead.
Do I understand right that trumpeters are legal game in Idaho? There's no quota.
There's no quota in Montana.
What about Idaho?
Idaho, this Montana, Utah, and Nevada have a swan hunt, and Idaho does not.
I don't believe so. I don't believe Idaho has a quota, but Nevada's quota is 10 trumpeters.
Yeah, right.
And do you want this?
Oh, nice.
If they want to.
Okay, she's got the swans taken every year from 2015 to now.
What's the range, Jason, from what's?
2015, we took 860, 2022, we took 854. We took 1274 in 2021, 1125 in 2019. So about 40% of tags were getting filled until the season started shutting down and then the taxes started.
2019 when you started having to close it.
Yeah.
And that's not bad, but now it's.
So we're losing 10% of the harvest. We harvested about 30% last year, and we were harvesting about 40% prior to the quota becoming an issue.
Yeah, some years were 45 or 46%, but.
What is the process? Well, you said when, it was 10, then Blair got bumped to 20. What's the process to get that higher? I mean, what do we have to do to make that higher?
Well, we have to provide them data, and it's
So
yeah.
no matter what, we're gonna have to wait on the isotope data.
And it might not be in our favor, right? We're just hoping.
Right.
Right. I would assume they'll want 5 or 6 years of data.
So number wise, we're pretty much where we're at. Quota wise. I mean, this is kind of what we're stuck with. And so the idea is, it's kind of a scare tactic, right? That's what we're talking about.
Well, we're trying to preserve opportunity.
Right, but at really the only ammunition we have is.
To be somewhat punitive.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the idea is like, we want people to take tundra swans. There's a tundra swan hunt, and there's an incidental take on trumpeter swans, not a, hey, let's take some as a trophy and get to the quota. And that's not helping other people have opportunity. So.
And the analysis is going on right now for the isotope study. So it'll likely take them until next at the earliest to get that information back. And then we'd still have to go through a management plan process within the framework of the Pacific Flyway. And so we're looking probably a few years out from making a change to the quota, which is why we want to address it now before there's more early closures.
And the Pacific Flyway, is that kind of the judge and jury over is that who holds it, or is that U.S. Fish and Wildlife?
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the entity, and we are operating within the Pacific Flyway with our waterfowl in Utah.
Thank you.
What is the possibility of having both species in Utah? Or is it one or the other?
It's going to be tundra swan. The only possibility would be to show that we don't need to have a quota because we're not worried about this subspecies of trumpeter.
That's what I mean. There's the possibility that subspecies, we'd have both the subspecies and the Rocky Mountain and the Yellowstone.
We would still have a tundra swan hunt, but we wouldn't have a quota on the trumpeters if we moved this way. And we might be able to move towards other things, removing other things that are kind of a hindrance. If we didn't have a quota, we wouldn't have to have an orientation course, a measuring process.
Jason, I think the question is, when we get the isotope data back, is it possible that we're going to show we have swans from both the Rocky Mountain and the Yellowstone population?
Yeah, totally possible.
So the problem.
And forgive my ignorance. A lot of this is being pushed because of the lawsuit.
The lawsuit happened when, in the early 2000s. It was brought on by some environmental groups, and then there was an environmental impact statement, and it's a subsequent situation where we had the orientation course. We had to manage this with permits. We had to measure swans and all and such. So that all came out of the lawsuit.
Always does.
So right now, you've got swan hunt, and you've got a whole bunch of tundra swans. When you reach 20 trumpeter swans, you shut it off. Is that how it works?
As immediately as we can, we have to shut it down.
We're required to by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So we're trying to extend. We want to be able to get completely through our swan hunt without ever hitting that quota. That's the whole point of our proposal.
So if we make it illegal to kill a trumpeter swan,
first one gets killed, we shut it all down.
How exactly that helps?
Still have a quote.
We still have to go.
Just trying to discourage.
It's just, yeah, we're just trying to discourage people from taking them as a trophy on purpose and put, you know, which you see all over social media. Taking a trumper as a trophy because they can, which is going.
So since you're new to the position and sounds like there may be a flaw potentially in the orientation video, how quickly will you get the orientation video?
Well, I have to look at the orientation video and see.
We have an orientation now.
Right, we have one. So we just have to see if it maybe needs to be revamped. How good is it? I don't know. But I am going to work with Phil over here on doing like a measuring video too for our staff. Just so we're making sure we're consistent.
So one more question. So the individual, I mean, last year was 800, I think, or before we hit. So and there were only 750 issued. Permits issued.
Yeah.
The individuals applying, are they aware of the quota beforehand? And so, I mean, you know.
That's all the orientation was.
That is in. Okay. So they understand this, the gamble.
There is currently an orientation course, and it's good. I mean, I don't think it's not that it does exist and it's good. It may be able to be improved, but there's a good orientation course.
No, I'm sure there is. I just didn't, I've never hung in.
Yeah, and that's what I'm
never
just clarifying that it's there.
I didn't.
There was some discussion, maybe we didn't have it, or maybe it was bad, but it's a good course.
Yeah.
Jason, can I just for some clarification, because this is not something that we deal with down here a lot. Tell me if I'm contextualizing this right. We've always had a quota. We've had a time for swan hunt for a long time. There's always been a quota associated with trumper swan with that hunt. For some reason, in the last few years, there's an element of the people that are hunting swans that have decided it's cool to purposefully take a trumpeter swan. In the past, that's how we've assumed it's been incidental, right? Somebody, made an honest mistake and took a trumpeter swan, and that's why the regulation was there. There's become an element that has decided to target trumpeter swans, and so they're reaching that quota sooner now, and we're shutting down the hunt sooner than we ever have. That's what we're trying to discourage, is that group that's out there purposely taking trumpeter swans, because that's impacting everybody else. And that's a fairly recent phenomenon.
Yeah, and I feel like it's part social media based and part because several years ago, a proportion of trumpeter swans got neck colored, and that's also another waterfowl hunting target. And that could have been part of the catalyst on social media, but that's just me riffing about this. So.
For whatever reason, we're hitting the quota a lot sooner than we used to.
So is the increase in trumpeter swan take not related to the increase in trumpeter swan population at all?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it is. More coming in and more are getting taken. There are more trumpeter swans here. Birds change migration patterns and we don't know why they do that. And so I think we're going to have more trumpeter swans here. But then we know we have people targeting them.
Sure.
So
there's probably some of both. That's a good point, also. But some of it's just there's more trumpeter swans around than there was in the past.
And I think, for the foreseeable future, I think we're going to have more trumpeter swans. That's what we've been seeing this few years. So.
Okay.
This was a lot of questions.
There was a lot of questions. I thought we were going to be lucky at 2 or 3.
I appreciate you guys taking the time to understand. That's good. Yeah.
Do we have swans at Quichaba yet?
Teresa, do we have swans at Quichaba?
I have not seen them there yet.
We're
by penguins.
Be careful when you shoot that swan.
There are a few over on the Sevier River every year, late in the winter.
All right. Any additional questions? Okay. Questions from the public? All right. No discussion or no comment cards, so we'll go right into the online comments.
Okay, so we had 8 people comment on this one. 3 strongly agreed, 4 strongly disagreed, 1 was in the middle. And the comments really revolved around what's going to incentivize people to not take a trumpeter swap? You know, is it confiscating it? Is it making it illegal? Is it other ideas? And it was polarized on both sides as the comments. People either really liked what we're doing or really disliked what we were doing. And the level of fine or level of criminality, what's the right word, Paul?
Violation.
Yeah, what level the violation is played a part in the comments, similar to what we've talked about here. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ray, I'm here. I might as well ask a question if it's all right.
Okay.
Is it too late?
Well, kind of, but
All right.
go ahead. If you're here, go for it.
It's not life or death.
If you want to stand up and state your name and ask your question.
Troy Henry, I'm with Utah Farm Bureau. This issue doesn't really affect our membership that much, but we have about 3 miles of riparian area over on Penguins Creek. And honestly, waterfowl is one of the best things about it. It's a lot of fun. But I guess I have a question. This is kind of along Austin's line of thinking. Is there a way that to make it a little less punitive for a mistake, that you could do something like 8 hours of dedicated hunter service on habitat to have that expunged or not be charged? If you're not willing to do that, then you've got an infraction or something like that.
I don't know. We'd have to have a discussion about that. The discussion we had was revolved around, could we separate take and possession and make those two separate things? And so that's the discussion we've had so far regarding what we could do that wouldn't make the actual take illegal.
So I think another way to do that, and I think this is what came out of the Central region, is to make it an infraction and not a misdemeanor level violation. And I think I believe, Jason, that's where the Central region landed. That's one way that they thought to do. They were thinking the same way, and that's where they went.
That's where the northern region landed.
Maybe it was the northern. Okay.
And just from a law enforcement constitutional perspective, unless there is a violation of law, there isn't really a mechanism for us to seize that animal or to take it from somebody. And so, like Austin mentioned, what other things can we do that are not necessarily like making it a criminal act? Well, if they harvest that animal and we don't have a violation associated with that, then we can't be taking that property from them. And so that's another kind of complicating factor as to why we kind of need it to be a criminal episode if you want us to be taking possession of birds from them.
That's the interesting discussions that we're having in Salt Lake, though, because it could be possible to make it take what they're telling me.
Separating taking possession of
that they can actually possess this because it's property of state Utah. But the take portion is not illegal, but it's
criminalized.
But it's property of state Utah, and it will be given back to the state of Utah.
It's a complicated issue.
Austin, do you have a question?
I just had a question to what you were saying. For example, if a guy checks a bear in and it's obviously a sow that was lactating, feeding young, like you can take that at that point. How?
My advice to how the officers should handle that is unless we can prove that sow had cubs at the time that it was harvested, we don't technically have a violation. We can prove in court. We may have a lot of suspicions of something, but unless we can show that there was a sow or that there was cubs with the sow when it was harvested.
So it's not illegal to take a lactating bear. It's illegal to take a bear with cubs.
You almost have to have video of the take with the cubs standing there to be able to.
Or be able to prove where the cubs are, et cetera. I mean, there's ways that we can make that case, but in general, we would just be seizing it because it's lactating.
You look like you're chomping at the bit to say something true. All right.
I got one more question for you. I thought we were done with questions. Go ahead. Anyway, when I think about this situation with the trumpeter swans and things, I like to fight on elk. If I shoot a bull because I didn't pay attention or was not very light, I'm going to get in big trouble. And so, what's the difference?
Can I make a comment? Let me try to move this along. I was gonna address what you just said, okay, which he's addressed, Andy's addressed, and Kevin's addressed. And I think, in my opinion, we're kind of going in circles around this a little bit. So I think you made a great comment that this is a tundra swan hunt. It's not a trumpeter swan hunt. And so if we harvest trumpeter, that's, you know, the idea here is to make that illegal take. Then there was the discussion of infraction. With an infraction, it doesn't go on your record. A misdemeanor goes on your record. So in order to allow more people opportunity, there needs to be some punitive put in place to stop the take.
Yeah.
But with an infraction, you get away from that misdemeanor, which stays on your record, and you're still paying a fine. So with what you're commenting, the reason I kind of interjected there is he already addressed that with, if it was an accident and you have a little nub coming off the back of your spike, he has the ability to give you an infraction. If you shoot a 6-point, well, shame on you. I hope he hammered it. Yeah. But he does have the legal way to make the infraction. So where I'm going with all this, and my comment is, I would like to have this be an infraction period and never go to a misdemeanor. That's where I'm sitting on this. I think there's a reason that we're doing this. We want to keep these permits open for the other 2,000 people that got sent home. But I think we can have enough incentive if you don't get to keep the animal and you have to pay a fine under the infraction. I don't want to see it go to someone having I don't want to have a conservation officer out there making a call that this guy gets an infraction and this guy gets a misdemeanor. I want to limit it to an infraction. That's my comment.
So we comments.
Yeah, we're comments now. Go ahead, Riley.
First, thank you for our ignorance and your patience. I appreciate that a lot. I have taught hunters education for a number of years now in the state of Utah, and what we're talking about in regards to sportsmen are ethics violations. That if you have individuals that and intent, and I would, being a representative of the sportsman, I would like to give us the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, over the last decade, I think that it's actually leans the other way. If we can get away with it and think that we can, we're going to press the issue, and press the issue, and press the issue, and it doesn't matter what that issue is. We try to get really, really good at what we do. So with that being said, I like your comments, Mr. Chairman, but I also would recommend and support what both the Northern and the Central has done with the women upwards.
Does anybody know what the maximum fine is we could put on an infraction?
I should know off the top of my head, but I don't recall the maximum for an infraction. Typically, they're going to be around $100, $150 per infraction.
We've got a Julie or Sean, either didn't know that off the top of your head.
Donna.
Because you were behind Jason. He said we had one law enforcement guy. I wanted to make sure you knew you had more.
Braden, Chad has his hand up.
Oh, Chad, go ahead.
I actually had the same question. I wanted to know what the fine was. I mean, an infraction is equivalent to a speeding ticket. So it's a slap on the hand. And unless you have a significant fine that accompanies the infraction, it's not going to mean much.
I'll share my comments. So swans are my nemesis. I can't figure out how to get one because I'm too cheap to hire a guy and I can't go on private land. So I go stand out on the dike and wait for one to fly over. I would hate for there to be is that a trumpeter? Is it a tundra? I don't know. Right? I'm not an expert. I've taken the course, but if it's a single coming in and it's quiet, that's a hard decision to make, and I'd hate for it to be a criminal decision. So I'm entirely against it being a misdemeanor and criminal at that point. In the same regard, I've got a swan permit the last 2 years, grandfathered people's points, trying to play the system because the season won't stay open long enough for me to get up there. Because if you live outside of the northern region, you want to wait till later and swan hunting gets better. And then the season closed on that. So yes, I'm very frustrated with this one as it is, but I sure as heck don't want to criminalize kids, because it's a great kid hunt up there for shooting a swan that flies overhead and knock it down. If it can be an infraction, be something smaller. I like the possession thing, because I think that could curb even the photo issue, the trophy shot. 'Cause a lot of guys shoot them, show it off, and they don't even want to mount it or do anything with it after that. So if it's illegal to possess a trumpet or swan, to me, that sounds like it would stop that, because now I could say that guy's illegally possessing and showing off a swan, right? Whereas the take may have been incidental. Now, the way I read your rule, you took the 5-year ban out if you shoot a trumpeter, because trumpeter was totally dissolved from the new rule, and now it's a tundra swan hunt. So I feel like the rule is gonna have to be totally rewritten if they go ahead with kind of stuff we're talking about. They made it criminal by separating those species. So I totally disagree with that. I think telling someone not to shoot a trumpeter is like telling them not to shoot an 800-pound cow elk. Well, if it stands out there by itself, you don't know if it's a 600-pound cow or an 800-pound cow. That's what we're talking about here as a non-expert waterfowl hunter. So those are my comments.
Okay, I've got a note from one of our directors, and that is if Charles is available. Charles, are you online? We have Charles on still, one of our attorney general reps.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Charles, could you give us some insight here?
Insight and specifics of how we would implement the type of motion that was made by the central RAC, or anything specific that you would like to know?
Now, what you'd like to know is how it would be.
I think what the maximum amount could be on infraction would be a key question.
I don't know if there's a maximum amount. I do know under it's under 23 Utah Code 2324.5. It has lists of restitution amounts for specific species, and the minimum amount is $100 per animal for swan. And so whether or not we have much discretion to go above that, my assumption is that that's usually what's asked for if it goes to court.
From data that we currently have, most of the violations are being fined $140, some are 110. So from looking through the data from recent ones, that's how it's going.
But we may be able to increase that if that's what we figured we needed to do to keep it under the floor.
I doubt that. I mean, it's an infraction is going to be decided by each judge. There's a recommended amount for each infraction, but then the judge has a lot of leeway as to what they actually assign. So we could try and get a bail recommendation that's higher, but if the judge says, no, I don't agree with that, you won't get it.
Yeah. Good.
And the other note that I got was, even if we cite as an infraction, a county attorney could still charge a misdemeanor if they saw extenuating circumstances that made them want to do it. So
if they put it on Instagram and said, I got my swan slam.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gene.
For the public, I don't want to see anybody get infraction or misdemeanor out of an incidental situation. They take these swans to the region offices and measure their beaks and look them over. It tells me that it can be hard to tell the difference. You take a kid from southern Utah that's never seen a swan in the wild, he's looking for a chance to hunt something, so he applies for a swan permit. That's a whole lot different than those boys that live in Corinne and see the swans all the time. I don't want to see a hunter punished when it's that hard to tell the difference.
So you think taking possession of the animal is enough disincentive?
Taking the possession, yeah. I know that if it was an incidental situation for me and I got an infraction out of it, I'd probably sulk for a week or more. But So, yeah. And as far as the, if it's a take and you confiscate it and there has to be a penalty, I don't think that's true. I don't think that most of, or at least the conservation officers that I've dealt with, quite deal that way. I was fishing one time with my grandkids and we limited out, headed out, and just leaving the pond, ran into 4 conservation officers. I was just tickled to death to show them how we'd limited out. We had one little problem. While I was showing them the fish, the grandkids was spilling their guts. And there were some fly fishermen there that were catching and releasing. And they caught a really nice fish. And one of them offered it to one of my grandkids, and he took it. Well, they lined us up and explained the situation, that we were all bad and that you can't take possession like that on a pond. They took the fish. We didn't get any damn citation. They took the fish. I don't know how they split it among 4 of them. But then I had a situation, or saw a situation where a young hunter killed a little antelope. The horns just didn't quite make sense. He and his dad did the proper thing, and they reported it the kill. They took the antelope, they gave him another tag, and no infraction. So this story about that there's got to be an infraction with a take, I don't think it's true. And I think that what the other 2 RACs went with is what we should go with.
That's absolutely true, that there doesn't have to be, and there's a lot of discretion of an officer to a warning, or Paul, correct me if I'm wrong.
Just the problem is if you see something on a warning, then there's no due process for the person to try and get it back. They don't get to go before a judge and say he took it wrongly or any of these things. So there are instances where officers have seized things on warnings and whatnot, but as a general purpose, we try to avoid that because it doesn't give the person any legal recourse to get that property back that we've taken from them.
All right, additional comments?
We're getting into the weeds legally a little bit.
Yeah.
My comment right now.
Well, my other comment is it feels like we're lining up similar, so let's keep it moving along. Go ahead.
Just one quick clarification. Into the weeds. Possession, an animal that has to be checked in like swans do, mountain lions, bears. Do you take possession of that animal when you physically grab it, or is it after it's checked in, then you can take possession?
That's an interesting question. So possession would be at the time that you have harvested that animal. As soon as you do it, that would be in your possession. And my understanding of how something like this would work with the swan situation is, yeah, you could snap some pictures and put them online and still not be, it would be the more long-term possession that would be the problem. So you would have to relinquish your possession when you put it in, not prior to that.
Charles has got his hand up.
Clarify for me, Charles.
Happy to. I just wanted to maybe share with the discussions that we had with how we might go about implementing the type of motion from the central RAC. So the reason why this is complicated is because the definition of take includes possession. So if you take an animal, you possess it. But with the swan check-in, you have 72 hours to check it in. And so I think there is some leeway from the Wildlife Board and from us in drafting this to say that possession occurs once check-in is done, right? So you can take it, you can harvest it, but you're not actually in possession of it until you've gone through that check-in process. And therefore, the possession would be illegal after that, or if you don't check it in, that type of thing would still be a punishable violation. However, if you have a trumpeter and you come and you check it in, it would not necessarily be seizing it because it's not that individual's property yet at that point until after the check-in. So the division could take possession of the animal as it is the property of the state until that point. And then once that person has checked that trumpeter in and they're not supposed to have had it, well, they've fulfilled their swan tag. They don't have an animal that year. They still go on that 5-year waiting period, if that helps clarify how that might actually play out when we draft this type of motion, if it passes, and that's what everybody wants us to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more clarifier that when you check a swan in, do they affix a seal or a tag or something, knowing that it's been checked so a taxidermist knows? Do we have a process like that?
I've never been in a region where we've checked swans in, so I couldn't answer that.
They do put a sticker on the back of the license so that we can verify that, and we can call the person in case we need any additional information, because we put everything into a swan harvest database to rectify that somebody has in fact checked the result.
There's a way to verify it's been checked out, but it's not something that's on the swan.
I was just trying to make sure a taxidermist gets a big trumpeter. It's like, has this been checked in? What state is this from?
Always Montana. All right. Are we ready to entertain a motion? That would require one of you making.
How much do we want to blow it up? Just say no, we do not accept recommendations, and we want to rewrite it.
You know, kind of what we talked about is you can follow what the other two RACs did, or just be okay. You know, they'll tweak it, but it seems to me that's kind of the general feeling of what this RAC wants to do.
I don't know their exact verbiage, how they did it. I'll make a motion that we accept the waterfowl rule recommendations and accept the swan hunt recommendations, except that we do not make it illegal to take a trumpeter swan, only to possess a trumpeter swan. That's the division would rewrite the rule accordingly.
I think that sounds good.
Section here.
Yeah, I think especially with that clarification on the possession, I think that sounds. All right, so we have a motion by Austin. Do we have a second?
Riley seconds.
Riley Roberts seconds. the motion. Do you have any additional discussion? Did you not get who got that motion?
I want to read the motion back. To accept the recommendation, the waterfowl recommendations, and accept the swan hunt recommendations, but not make it illegal to take a trumpeter swan, but do make it illegal to possess a trumpeter swan. Do you want to clarify that possession happens after the swan is checked in? Or?
I mean, ideally, but I'll let them get in the weeds about
that. Did I get that right?
Any further discussion?
Denise and Alyssa, have you got that? Looks like they've got it.
All in favor? Chad?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ask is unanimous. Need a little break? Let's do 5 minutes, it'll be 10. 5 minutes.
If you read the same list of those that shoot trumpeter.
to agenda item number 8, the live game purge rule amendments. Hey, Avery here, or is she online?
I'm online.
Okay. Avery, do you want to, anything you want to clarify there? We watched the presentation, so any clarification we need?
We have just a couple changes from the original presentation. We fixed some wording in the draft rule to reflect the intent that a field trial COR is not required on a DWR dog training area if the event was authorized by the area manager. So basically, people can schedule field trials at Lee K without having to get a COR. And then added 2 genuses to our definition of pheasant. So we added Ceramaticus, which includes Reeves and copper pheasants, and also recommending including Chrysolophus, which is a golden and lady Amherst pheasant. Also discussing removing turnix quail and button quail from the game bird rule, as they're more fit better in the poultry rule, as they're mostly raised for eggs and meat rather than for game birds. And aside from that, we don't have any changes or updates different than what was presented during the presentation.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC? And I think we're out of public. I guess
I'm still hanging on.
Farm Bureau public. Okay. And we don't have any comment cards. So do you want any public online comments?
There was one, and it was strongly in favor.
Strongly in favor. Good. All right, discussion from the RAC.
My only comment is I appreciate the division looking at cleaning up a lot of this language. We see a lot of states in the West that don't do this often enough, and it creates problems not only for the public, but for themselves. So kudos to working on it.
Agreed. Thank you. Good comment. Any other comments? Go ahead.
Mine is just, I know of a few places where they release them, and that was my concern. Both places where they do release them, though, I don't think there's other birds to mix with, but I like the comment or the presentation that they're trying to watch for the possibility of transmitting disease and stuff.
All right. We entertain a motion.
I would make a motion, Chair.
We have a motion from Lily.
I'll make a motion to accept that presented.
Okay. We have a second on the motion. I'll second. And Craig second. So Craig Log seconded the motion. Riley made to accept as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Chad? Any opposed? Pretty sure you meant aye on accept.
You did.
We'll say with unanimous to stick with that. Thanks, Chad. Appreciate you hanging in there online. That's always a challenge. Next agenda item, collection, importation, possession, rule amendment. Nope. Yeah, that is what we're at. Okay. And that's Charles.
Yep. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me again okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I haven't had an opportunity to meet all of you in person, but my name is Charles Lyons. I spoke previously. I'm Assistant Attorney General, representing Division of Wildlife Resources, and happy to answer any questions you may have related to this rule or recommended rule change. We're under the presumption that everybody is pretty well versed in the presentation that we gave online. But I did want to point out 3 changes that have come about since that recorded presentation was made. We had a member of the public reach out and ask that we add some language related to grandfathering in certificates of registration that are already held prior to this rule change. And so we did add some language, just recognizing that CORs currently in effect would be valid and not impacted by this rule change, and they'll be honored for the life of those certificates of registration. And then there's really just some technical tweaks to some language in the aquatics subpart. One being to the definition of ornamental aquatic animal species, and the other related to importation of ornamental aquatic animal species, really just requiring that someone importing that type of animal, when it comes from outside of the United States, there is a form from the Fish and Wildlife Service. The rule clarifies making sure that someone is able to provide that form to the division if asked for it. And so those are really the only changes other than what was in the presentation originally.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC? All right. Questions from the public? Yeah, I need to pay attention. Sorry, there's no comment cards. Online comments?
There were, make sure I'm on the right one. We had 3 people, 2 strongly agreed, and 1 was neutral, and I don't think there were any written comments. I think they would gone on to talk about other things and hit this one and thought they would at least indicate whether they liked it or not. So,
any additional discussion from the RAC?
I'd just like to say, in agriculture, we deal with a lot of weed problems that were brought from other countries. And so I think that we need to be ever vigilant to keep, our species as clean as possible, because it's anything,
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other comments? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion as presented.
So Craig has made a motion to accept as presented. Do you have a second?
Second.
Verlin has seconded. Verlin King seconded the motion to accept as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Chad? And
Aye.
See, everyone said they're in favor. Do opposed. Unanimous. Last one. Well, I guess not the last one. Second to last one. CW, the last wildlife one. CWMU variance requests. Chad Wilson. He's online. Oh. Yeah, so I guess we're Chad, this has been an easy one for you. I assume that you can just say you have all the information and move on.
Well, we were here last month with the same thing. So what I would say is, I guess first, I would just like to apologize for any public hunter that may have thought that these pieces of land were in trade lands, and yeah, just not a good thing. So I want to apologize to that. I want to apologize to the CWMU for having a map that showed them in trade lands when that was never the intent. Like we said last month, this land in question was in a CWMU, an elk CWMU up to 2019. In 2019, it was clear that the CWMU never intended that to be part of trade lands. Yeah, so I guess if you have any other questions, I'll clarify.
Thanks, Chad. Before we get into questions, let me just remind, as I pointed out on the motions from the Wildlife Board, this one will be easy to dive off into the weeds, but the CWMU is going to be up for review. And there were some directions from the Wildlife Board of the things they wanted reviewed, the CWMU rule. And so, let's stay out of that. That's coming up in the next couple of months. So let's keep it focused on this action item. So with that said, questions from the RAC. Go ahead, Austin.
I'll ask Chad a question. I wish you were standing here in front of us, Chad, but can you explain briefly trade lands?
Yeah. So when there's public land in a CWMU, then there has to be public benefit. And one of the things, the rule doesn't go into it very clearly or very specifically, but we've taken that as being able to trade them. Trade lands meaning the CWMU would open up private lands that they own that are not in a CWMU in exchange for the public land that is in the CWMU.
And do those trade lands have to be posted currently?
Well, like I said, there's not a lot of regulation. So currently not. It's something that we're going to be asking them to do. And it will be something that we tackle in the upcoming rule.
And that was one of the specifics in their motion. Sure. Yeah, but
Does North Peak CWMU, the one in question, do they have public land within their CWMU boundary?
Yes, they do.
And they do have trade lands then?
Yeah. And just so you know, so those, any CWMU with public land in it, by law, it has to be reviewed every 5 years. We renew every 3 years, so we're just going to renew those every 3 years. We're going to look at it. So if they continue to have public land in there, that will come back before the RAC and the board in November. So we could really look at trade lands at that time. We can look at the public land that's in the CWMU. There's recommendations on that have come out of the CWMU advisory committee, but yeah, that would be probably the most appropriate time to look at trade lands or public land in the CWMU.
So just to confirm, North Peaks has public land and they also have trade lands that they've given to the public hunter, but they are not the same lands that are being annexed in as part of this variant.
Correct.
good clarification. Thanks. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a variance request, Chad, right? Can you tell us how often do variance requests get denied, and I mean, what's the percentage to get approved? I mean, is this just something that always gets approved, or do we say no to quite a few of them?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different kinds of variance requests, and we haven't seen a lot of non-contiguous ones recently. We did have one since I've been coordinator. It was a little bit different because it was three chunks of land that could have been three different CWMUs, but it goes through the CWMU advisory committee. That committee really looks into whether it makes sense or not, and then they make a recommendation. And us as the division makes a recommendation too. So on this one, on both of these that are coming through, it's both the CWMU advisory committee's recommendation to accept these and the divisions. There's a lot of other variances with under acreage elk or other things. And you see, I would say overall, a majority of variances don't get an approval from the CWMU advisory committee.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Austin.
On the CWMU advisory committee, Chad, is there any public sportsman representation on that committee?
Yeah, yep. And rule spells out who we have to have on that. And I don't have it memorized, unfortunately, but I think there's at least 2 sportsmen and an at-large, an elected official. So it's got a variety of people on it.
Chad, could you put a reason to why the North Peak CWMU requests this variance? The reason I ask that is obviously they're an elk CWMU. They're trying to increase acreage to get more elk permits because they have other means to get a general deer permit to use on these private lands. But can you explain as to why they need this?
Yeah, they're not asking for additional elk permits or any additional permits right now. I think it's just a matter of that this is the same landowner that owns the land inside the CWMU. They have land that they feel is quality land that can help benefit the CWMU that's nearby. And they'd just like to add it in to add to the experience. Just a little bit more options of a place to go.
Would it be fair to say that the extended season dates would be the main reason why they want to do it, why they would want to add this land?
Well, they have extended season dates either way, right? Like they can hunt that on the CWMU as it is. So I don't know that I think it's just that it's the same landowner. They like being part of the CWMU program. They get a lot of benefit from it, and just add another couple pieces that are close by to give them a few more options to hunt.
Could you define the word close by for us? Like, if I become a giant corporate landowner and I've got a CWMU and I have land that's 5, 10, 15, 20 miles away, what is close by in the CWMU world?
Yeah, so this one, it's within 1.5 miles, both of the acreage. And that is something too, is as the rule comes open, we'll look at, this is actually asked by the board too, that we look at this and put some parameters on it. Just looking at it from the discussions that we had, it's in the same unit. It's within 1.5 miles. If we had other people come through, their ground was 10 miles away, the division at that point would balk at it. I'm confident that the CWU advisory committee would look at that and I would guess that they would also not accept that. So there's not a hard, fast rule right now of how close it has to be, but right now it's just got to make sense to the division biologist, the regional manager, our Salt Lake office, the advisory committee. It has to make sense to all of them, and it has to make sense to the RAC and to the wildlife board for it to pass.
One more question. I know it's really hard to take a gift away from someone once you've given it to them and try to steal it back. So the question is, if we approve this variance now, and I know we like to say, we're looking at the whole rule, we're going to redo the whole rule, but when would this come up again? And if it was taken away, what's the process there? If it's approved now, is it set and they've got it?
Yeah, and you saw the Northern region tackled that a little bit in their motion, pretty much making a motion that if the rule changed and this didn't fit within the non-contiguous boundaries that we set, then that it would not be grandfathered in, that at that point it would be taken out. I've talked to the CWMU about that, and they're in agreement with that. They're okay with if those rules come out and it doesn't fit it, that they're not still in.
My question is, I think, as I remember the details of it, there's about 2,000 more acres that's going to add to a private property that's going to add to CWMU. My question is, how much public land is being lost in that to make that continuous?
Yeah, so there's none. We're not adding any additional public land at all to this one.
Well, those two spaces, those two spots will be independent. They won't be continuous then. Is that right?
Repeat that one, sorry.
That's the reason for the variance, is because it's not.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jane.
That helps me a lot. So.
On the public land that's included, is the public able to access that land in any way, at any time, anyhow, not just for deer hunting?
Yeah, so when public land's part of the CWMU, it's open for access for everything but hunting the species that the CWMU has. So if it's an elk CWMU, you could go coyote hunting on it, you could go grouse hunting on it, you could just go for a stroll on that public land. It doesn't close it down to it's like not a no trespassing. You just couldn't hunt elk on it.
But it's completely surrounded by private land that's part of this CWMU.
No, this one has some that's on the boundary that it is accessible. I think it does have a section or two inside of it that's not accessible, but the majority of it is accessible on a boundary. State law, one of the reasons we can include public land, state law states, is to make an identifiable boundary. In this scenario, I think it's fence lines and ridge tops that make it very identifiable. And it's been that way, I think, since the inception, which I believe is since PHU. So this has been the boundary on this one for a really long time. And like I said, that has to be reviewed at least every 5 years. This summer, it will be reviewed. It'll be back to you guys in November and December to decide whether having that public land in there is still a good idea or not.
Well, I guess I looked at his map different and didn't understand it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Merlin.
So because there's public land in there, they've got to put up some trade land. Does the DWR compare those two, like if it's good hunting in there, they trade land that is good, or is it just acreage, or do you take into account apples to apples or apples to oranges?
Yeah, and what I've found, that's a really good question. And what I've found is that we do try to make it be comparable hunting ground. As you talk to people, a lot of people's idea of what comparable and what is good and what's not come out very differently. Even these pieces of land that they're trying to add in as non-contiguous, somebody was questioning those in our CWMU advisory committee and told us that those were terrible lands and that they weren't good trade lands. And now we're here fighting. Well, the CWMU thought they were good enough to add them into to try to add them into the CWMU, and others have been questioning whether they're trade lands and wanted them to stay trade lands. So I mean, there's some subjectivity there, I guess. But yes, we do try to look at those. We try to make an estimation of whether those are comparable. And if they're not comparable, we don't make the recommendation. At least if we don't feel they're comparable, we won't make the recommendation for it to be a trade land.
Any additional questions? Any questions from the public? We don't have any comment cards, so online comments.
So 6 total votes, 1 strongly agreed, 5 strongly disagreed, and then really there were some written comments on this, and they revolved around the idea of really more the trade lands than the variance request for the non-contiguous land speed.
All right, discussion from the RAC. Go ahead. No? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. They've got like 27,000 acres of continuous CWMU there. I think there's one public dirt tag. The chances, it's been suggested that, well, the public may benefit by this variance because that one public hunter might be able to hunt on that land. With 27,000 other acres, including some public land, I doubt that they're going to send that one public hunter to that land. I think there's got to be some financial advantage to adding this to the CWMU. And I don't think it's in the public interest.
Is that a motion?
No, I think we're just commenting. Any other comments? Go ahead.
I'll make my comments. Just I'm looking at it from the public side. I mean, I can't overlook all the comments and separate emails we've got in that said, you know, this doesn't seem right. As I've sorted through those, it seems like most of them are pointing at errors or flaws in the CWMU rule as a whole, specifically this trade lands. I think part of the motion has to be that the division get their act together. The trade lands meant that mysteriously has disappeared. The outreach sector, I don't feel like has touched recently. And now we brought it to light, so we better do something about it. So that's what I feel like most of the comments have done. I did attend the CWMU meeting they had at the Western Hunt Expo. I feel like the CWMU program is doing some great projects of their own that it's easy to look in as an outsider and say they're the private landowners that aren't looking out for the public, but I don't think that's true. I think that's closed-minded. But I hope this rule can be cleaned up for sure for all parties to benefit from it.
I would actually echo exactly what you said. I think there's some things that need cleaned up, but I think the wildlife board's already directed that they open up the rule and look at it. Yeah, and I think most of the comments I received really are will be, hopefully be addressed better on this variance. I don't know that I have any concerns. Any other comments? Entertain a motion.
Who wants to make a motion? I'll make a motion that we approve it on contingency, like the Northern RAC did, that if it changes, they won't get grandfathered in.
So accept as presented, but this won't be grandfathered. Yep. So that motion made by Craig. Hold on. We're just looking for a second. We're giving you, okay, you can keep typing. We have a second, and we got to repeat the second a couple times. Do we have a second to the motion? Verlin seconded the motion. So Craig made the motion. Verlin seconded it. You have it typed yet? Almost.
Okay, so the motion, as I understand it, to accept as presented with the contingency that if the rule revision, the CW rule revision doesn't allow this, it will not be grandfathered in under the new rule.
Any additional discussion on the motion? All in favor? Chad?
Aye.
And opposed? Jean? Jean, did you want to state any additional reasons for your opposition other than the comment you already made?
I don't think it's going to hurt the world if it is. If it is as the motion suggested, it's just that I think there's a little more to it than's been explained to us. And I'm just not thinking that it's going to be helpful to the public at all.
Thanks, James. So the motion passes 7-1. Kevin, on the agenda, we have the election next, and then these two. We can do those two first, can't we?
Those are yeah, those are only there because they're only for the southern region.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I know you have to follow the agenda. That's substitution of words. Okay, so the southern region presentation. So first we have the translocation management plan for the displaced desert tortoise in the Upper Virgin River Recovery Community. Boy, that's a long title.
So the division's translocation management plan was completed in support of the Washington County Habitat Conservation Plan. And I am happy to answer any questions that you have, or I can, repeat some part of the presentation if you want.
How long have you worked for the division?
I've worked for the division since 1997.
And is this your first RAC meeting?
No, I actually did.
Present that?
I actually did attend a RAC meeting probably over a decade ago. But yeah, within the last decade, yes, my first.
So what I'm pointing at here is let's ask Ann some questions, because she's not going to get this conversation.
And I do have a question.
Okay.
There has been a little bit of opposition on this.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering if you might help us understand, maybe clarify for us where that opposition is coming from and your thoughts on it. So
Right.
the one thing I got is this is a recreation area and it's going to shut it down for recreation.
No, actually, it is heavily recreated, but I mean, there's tortoises at Snow Canyon State Park, which has tons of trails and has not impacted recreation. There's tons of trails in the National Conservation Area, the Red Cliff National Conservation Area, and it hasn't impacted, the tortoises have not impacted recreation. We have had a translocation site in Zone 4 that's been very successful. We've actually translocated over 575 tortoises in that area, and that area is heavily recreated. In fact, recreation has exploded in that area, in all areas actually that I mentioned, the Red Cliff Desert Reserve, the Red Cliff National Conservation Area, and Snow Canyon State Park. So
that's a comment that came to you directly because it didn't come through the.
Yeah, I got an email. You challenging my.
I'm looking at my information.
No, it wasn't on there. No, it was a direct email.
And another comment that I read was somebody was concerned about where these tortoises are coming from, or if that would be. So basically, these tortoises are displaced tortoises from developed areas. So the Habitat Conservation Plan allows for limited development on private lands. So what the process is we go to those areas, we clear them of desert tortoises, and then those tortoises are then placed temporarily at the care facility in Hurricane. And then assuming that they're healthy, then they are translocated in the spring or the fall. So they're actually animals that are displaced from developed private property. And it allows for, conservation of tortoises that otherwise would not be used for recovery of tortoises of the species. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, questions from the public?
I haven't read the proposal, so I don't have enough information to even ask an intelligent question. But is any grazing being displaced by the translocation of the tortoises?
There was in 1996, as part of the incidental take permit and the Washington County Habitat Conservation Plan, the county actually purchased out all of the grazing allotments. So the translocation doesn't really happen. It happened a long time ago. Yeah.
Thank you. We don't have any comment cards, so, and didn't you say no online comment?
One, strongly in favor.
One strong.
Which is why I was wondering where you got yours from. Mine didn't match.
I actually got two comments. So. Okay, any comments from the RAC? If not, I'll entertain a motion. All right, Chuck.
I present a motion that we accept the translocation, and I'm not going to say the whole title, but it's basically
Okay, we have a second on the motion.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Chuck and a second by Dan. The additional discussion. Call for a vote. All in favor? And Chad?
Aye.
Passes unanimous. Last one, and this is informational, so this won't be an action. It's just information on the Carolyn Front WMA HQP.
So I'm Stan Gurley, and I am presenting, I presented the habitat management plan for the Fairmont Front WMA, or wildlife management area. And the process requires that this is one of the steps that we go to is bring to the regional RAC to, as an informational item. So far, it's gone through all the other committees, it's gone to the Iron County Commission. We formed a committee, they helped write the plan and vote on certain items within the plan. So that I'll take any questions. Awesome.
I have a question. I did a bunch of dedicated hunter hours up there and planted a bunch of seeds in some of those cleared areas. How is that doing? Is it coming back? Is it good for the deer?
So I'm assuming you find a bitter brush.
Yeah.
Yeah. So bitter brush is a very sensitive and finicky species, and we're seeing it respond in certain areas with certain methods, and other areas we're not seeing that. It's we're still working on rhymes and reasons. We're working with the Rocky Mountain Research Center to kind of determine what's the best way to treat it, or to not treat it, but necessarily plant it. So there are some areas that are seeing response, but generally speaking, it's very low success. So, but if it does grow, yes, it is very good for mule deer. That's the primary focus of the Fairmont Front WMA.
My other question is just about overutilization by recreationalists. I mean, the whole front there has gotten more popular in four-wheelers and creating roads where they want off-road travel and camping, if you will. I mean, is there concerns from your part on that? Is Iron County Sheriff helping you on that? What are we at?
So yeah, as we met as a committee, so as you saw in the presentation, we had representatives from Iron County, we have DWR law enforcement there, and there was a lot of concern that yes, we want to protect this for wintering mule deer and make sure that that is the purpose for this WMA. The county, Marilyn Wood, the county commissioner that sat on the committee, she was very supportive of making sure we don't have this turn into a, a bike riding area or a hiking area, and that we keep the main focus. And so, as you probably saw in some of our recommendations for what we're going to do, we're going to make sure we minimize illegal road creation. We're going to enforce closed roads and seasonally closed roads. And then we also identified through the land use rule, the use, what can be used on the WMA. So there's always concern of that because, I mean, the valley is growing, our population is growing rapidly. And people see that and they enjoy the public space, especially so close to town. But as of right now, we do see some effects, but not significant effects yet.
And there is a seasonal closure that goes from when to when?
January 1 to April 30th.
On the whole WMA.
Yes.
Yes.
Seasonal
Road closure.
Road. Yeah, it's not like the northern Utah where we close the WMA. It's just motorized vehicle access.
We put a chain across the road and close it down vehicle access.
Is target shooting allowed on the WMA currently?
It is.
It is not prohibited.
It's not prohibited.
Has to do with the fencing. You made a mention of it in there, and I've talked to a couple people who are on the committee, Jake and some of them. And that was one concern that they had, because the Dave, who runs next to it, runs sheep, and you guys wanted to put a barbed wire fence, and that won't work for his sheep herd. So that was just a concern that was brought to me, so.
Yeah, so in the process of building these fences, we have involved Dave and Jake on designs that will serve both of our purposes. So they have been involved in the process of fence design, and from what I understand,
Dave, you told me that will work. Thank you.
But I can understand the concern because sheep and barbed wire fences generally don't mix there.
That was one thing to take out.
Right, Jim?
On that East Paraguna, piece, have you done anything at all on that? Is it fenced? Or is there anything that, any projects, restoration or anything?
The one up the canyon or the one at the base just above Paraguna?
The one up the canyon.
Well, that one is partially fenced, and we have worked with the adjacent private landowners to improve those the fencing. Then you can speak to the restoration.
Yeah, so there are plans to do some restoration up there as soon as next year in conjunction with BLM or potentially a Forest Service project that will be going on in that area. So it's in the works. It's not unforgotten, or it's not forgotten.
Thank you.
Do we have any idea how, with the deep snow winter we had, how was highway mortality on 91? Was it abnormal? Average?
I'm not a good road number guy. Help me.
That's the pricing.
Summit. Yeah. It's anecdotal only. I didn't feel like it was any worse than normal. We do see deer get hit there quite a bit, but.
Jason, you're there. That's an area you're familiar with.
I would say it was normal amount.
Other questions? And again, this was informational only, so if you have comments, you can make them, but we won't do any motions.
Please tell Stan, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dan.
All right. Now for the last one, we'll turn it over to you, Kevin.
Okay, so you all received an email. As we talked about last time, a reminder that it's time to elect a new chair and vice chair for the RAC. This will be Braden's last RAC meeting. And so there was really two names that floated to the top in the emails that I got. And those were Austin and Bart in terms of the names that came forward for the chair and the vice chair. From my standpoint, I would be very comfortable with either. I think both Austin and Bart would would do a good job in managing the meeting, which is probably the main responsibility of the RAC chair. And so with that, we can proceed in a couple of ways. If we can do talk about, pros and cons of one is the chair and one is the vice chair. We could do a ballot where you tear off a corner of your thing and write a name on it and send it in to me and I'll tally them. However you would like to proceed. Austin, would you be willing to accept the nomination as the chair or the vice chair? I guess is, okay. And I did have a conversation with Bart earlier today, knowing that he wasn't going to be here. He was flattered as well and would be willing to serve in whatever way the RAC would like him to in moving forward. So.
Can you explain a little bit the duties of those two offices?
I can tell you that the vice chair doesn't have to do anything. So there's been, how long have you been chair?
Wow, I was trying to, at least 4 years.
So I think there's been 3 meetings in 4 years that I've been chair.
So the main responsibility is with the chair. The chair will get an email prior to the agenda going out to the rest of the RAC with a request to review. And that comes to me and to the chair to review the agenda, make sure that we've got everything right and that there isn't anything that needs to be added. An immediate responsibility for the chair will be to help me interview people that have been nominated to fill the seats on the RAC that are going to be vacated and help me make the recommendations up to the director and the executive director on who will be filling the seats. And we have we have four open seats, including Nick's that when he had to resign for health issues. So we've got Braden's seat, Craig, Nick, and Gene. Sorry, I was looking right at you, Gene, and then forgot. So
we can extend Gene.
So that'll be an immediate responsibility. That only happens occasionally. So most of the responsibility is managing the meeting, knowing how the meeting goes, the sequence of, when do we take public comments, when do we take RAC comments, and making sure that we can run the meeting that way. And then after the meeting, when Denise and Alyssa finish the minutes, those are sent to myself and to the RAC chair to review prior to those being sent up to the wildlife board. So there is some extra time that's required of the chair that's not required of a normal RAC, just a regular RAC member. The vice chair, I think, can be as involved as the chair wants to make him, but the main responsibility is to chair the meeting when the chair can't be present. So
are there any things, obviously Braden can't vote unless it's tie, right?
So that's the other thing to keep in mind.
And can Braden make proposals?
So certainly he can share his thoughts and opinions, which Braden I think has always done a good job at sharing his point of view. The RAC chair doesn't make motions and only votes to break a tie.
So are we limited to Austin and?
No, but I sent an email out asking for people to send nominations in. Those are the two that came. If you want to make another nomination right now, you're welcome to.
Okay, Riley, would you accept the nomination as chair?
Not with Austin's name in there.
My thought is I rely on Austin on a lot of the issues. He studied them out. I think he's invaluable as far as his understanding of and the motions that he makes and stuff. And I wouldn't want to tie his hands as a chairman and not being able to. I just appreciate him and the time he spent on these issues. And I can't spend that time. I have a hard time getting enough time to watch with presentations. So that's my concern.
So Vernon, I think, from my point, I think that's a very valid point. I think Austin ought to respond here too. I don't think his ability to ask questions and clarify and make sure that the RAC understands exactly what's being presented and what the issues are surrounding it. I don't think that changes as the chair making motions. That will be something that won't happen anymore. So I think there's a valid.
But I think that would be a detriment to the Southern RAC if he couldn't make the motions that he does, because it's obvious that he spends a lot of time on the material.
I think we've all recognized that and appreciate that for sure.
I definitely agree. Austin makes probably 95% of the motions, and they're well versed, and they definitely studied his issues and knows the issues a lot better than I do. Not that you wouldn't make a great chairman, but to lose that ability to make a motion, I think would be a detriment to the Southern RAC as well.
I'd say before we had Austin, we had Braden, and Braden built this lot just like Austin is doing now before he was chairman. And I know it was his concern when he took the chairman job about that he wouldn't, it might limit him, but I don't think it has. And we've respected all of his opinions and the work he's done as the chair. I think it worked with Braden. I think it'll work with us.
Can you respond?
It's
a strange sort
We're just gonna talk about you.
I appreciate some of those comments. I definitely did expect to be flattered by some of your comments, because I look up to all of you, look up to the process, especially the division. I'm just excited and happy to serve in any respect. And you're not gonna shut me up no matter what seat I'm in. I'm still gonna ask questions. And if you take me off the rack, I'm gonna sit right there and ask questions. So, I'm willing to be involved in however we can, and I think we'll get some great new people on the rack and move on no matter what happens. So I'll support you guys. And Tammy, she's not here.
One additional comment I'd make is Austin will, or whoever will be, since Austin just talked. I think both actually would do a great job. I have a ton of respect for Austin and also for, I just forgot his name. But someone's respect that. That was bad. I really do have a ton of respect for Bart. I think he does a great job. I do think it's important to note though that the chair is critical in new RAC members coming on for that selection. So consideration.
There is one other huge responsibility that comes with the chair that I did not mention, and that's going to all of the board meetings.
Yes.
And traveling up to some, and being able to articulate the sentiments of this RAC to the board, which I think Austin would be very, very good at in that role. So I don't know how I forget that. That's probably the biggest.
Well, I thought maybe you just didn't want to say that, because I might say never mind.
Total blank.
So I believe the process before, we just made a verbal nomination and then voted. I know you mentioned Terrell Square.
Yeah, I would.
And
we
so
can do it.
before that happens, I would like to say Braden has done a phenomenal job. I've been to a lot of different RAC meetings. I won't say a lot, but I've attended some of the other RAC meetings, and we've got some great RAC members and great RAC chairs throughout the state. And Braden's done a phenomenal job. I think that he's controlled the meeting. I think that he has been very eloquent with his speech. I have seen him emotionally charged and still be able to maintain that, and there's a ton of respect for that, and highlights what I think that we need more of in the state in general. Most of the things that we have dealt with as RAC members. I mean, if you look back, I know in my tenure, most of the time, the meetings are emotionally charged and it's a lot of negativity. And so we get to sit up here and either get yelled at or get told that we don't know what's going on, or that the division is dumb and they don't know what's going on and the state's going to hell in a handbasket. And to be able to deal with that in a very professional manner has been fun to watch. So thank you, great. Gene, you're my hero, buddy. I will miss you. I will miss those. I talk about you in Tropic after RAC meetings more than you know, buddy.
So as you know, Riley, when we're done with this, we're gonna take a minute and recognize everybody that's leaving the RAC.
Well, so with that, I would hope that when we look at this motion, we look at those individuals who will be coming in, so that we can replace the legends, so that we can replace the Bradens, because I think that we have a great core group. And so with that being said, knowing that I've got to go to Salt Lake and speak eloquently, I would make a motion for Austin to be the chair of the Southern RAC.
Okay, there's a motion on the table.
I'll second it.
Okay, would we include in that motion for Bart to serve as the vice chair? As the other name that
I think you can do them as two separate motions.
Okay.
Unless somebody wants to make it all inclusive. I thought, well, it's where Tammy's not here. She can't get out scot-free.
Gabby has expressed to me that she has got too much on her plate already. So I don't think she would accept the nomination.
It doesn't stop us from nominating.
Can I make an amendment? Riley continues as vice chairman.
Would you accept that?
I would.
No second that one.
To your motion and to the nomination?
Yeah, both.
Okay. And it's been seconded, so I think we're good to vote. This is, Ray usually gets to call for this vote, but this one's mine, so.
Does that mean I get to vote?
Yes, you get to vote. So we have a motion to elect Austin as the chair and for Riley to continue to serve as the vice chair of the Southern RAC. All in favor? Chad?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. I think we'll be well served with that. So with that being said, Austin and Braden, the three of us need to pick a time to do interviews to replace the 4 seats that will be open, which is it's going to take some time and it's worth, putting the time and effort into to make sure we're making good selections. So I'll be in touch on that and get you guys the materials for those that have been nominated to fill the seats that are being vacated. Okay, I think that's the end of our formal meeting, so we can go ahead and end the broadcast. But I do want to to continue on with what Riley started. Thank those who are departing. We already recognized Nick. I think he did a great job, but I would second what Riley said, Gene. I will make a commitment that as we're interviewing RAC members, that we try to find someone who will represent kind of the guy that just wants to go hunting, and make sure that the voice that you've served on this RAC continues to be voiced on the RAC. Braden, again, I would second everything that was said about it. I've received many comments while we're in meetings from members of the director's office and others complimenting the way that you manage our meetings. And I think those are well deserved. And Craig, thanks for, the polarization that happens between sportsmen and agriculture can either approach with
a way to find a path forward that's good for both, or to make the polarization stronger. And I've appreciated your approach to that and to try to find things that work for both. So thank you. I do have a gift for everybody, but if anybody else wants to share anything before we do, please.
No, I would. I'd just like to say thank you. I think years ago, the southern region was kind of looked at as the wild card, and you guys have all done a great job. Change that. At least somewhat. Think a lot. Think a lot.
I think a lot.
And so that's compliments to everybody. Couldn't echo more what they said. Gene, you and I were going to RAC meetings way before we were ever on the RAC, so don't change forever. And Craig, you know, I think you've just done a great job too. Just exactly what Kevin said. So there's some polarization that can happen there. You and I've disagreed admirably on a couple of things, and we still come and are friendly to each other. So that's how it should be. That's a RAC should be able to disagree, and at the end of the day, leave social. So that's the goals.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Might not be all done with me and Braden. Come November and April.
Gene, anything as your last chance to be, or well,
Geneism?
anything you'd like to add? Just about your experience.
Appreciate Kevin. After I'd served the first term, I told him I thought that maybe I was getting a little long in the tooth to try and go on. He said, well, we'd like you to go on, and if it's any place you want to bail out, it'll be okay. And so he talked me into it, and I appreciate that I've enjoyed these last 3 years with the RAC, and I appreciate all of you guys. I think this has been a real good group of men to work with, plus Tammy.
Greg,
Yep. I appreciate working with all you guys and getting to know it and better acquainted with you. And I love the opportunity to represent my point of view, and I appreciate, being accepted and the points that I've been able to make, and it's been great. Thanks.
Okay, last word yours. Greg, if you have anything else you'd like to add?
I already said my last words, so
Okay.
looking forward to getting back in the audience and say what I want to say again.
We are, Salt Lake hasn't disconnected us yet, so I don't know if